watched India visit. Putin's first official visit to India since the Ukraine war began and after Trump unleashed the global tariff tyranny over Russian oil. For India, hosting Putin now signals a reaffirmation of its strategic autonomy. Despite measures imposed by the US linked to Moscow's oil, New Delhi continues to put its interests first, prioritizing energy affordability but also an independent world view. From Moscow's perspective, this visit reaffirms the notion that India is an equal, indispensable partner to Russia, even with Beijing in the picture. For New Delhi and Moscow alike, the stakes are high, but so is their shared history. As the world watches, could this Delhi rendezvous prove to be a defining moment in shaping the contours of geopolitics to come? At a time when global fault lines are being redrawn, this visit serves as a diplomatic message to the West. India will not be cowed down by sanctions or geopolitical coercion. Rather, it intends to chart an independent foreign policy, reinforcing its decades-old relationship with Russia while balancing ties with the West. If the suggestion was that India is walking a tightrope, the message from New Delhi at least is, we are free from any concern, we are friends to all, enemies to none. Take it or leave it. That and more coming up with our special guest joining tonight. But here's why the West's dislike for Russia, for Vladimir Putin, doesn't quite trickle down in India. It doesn't translate the same way. This is the major reason why India and the West haven't been able to see eye to eye or haven't been on the same page as far as this relationship is concerned, because the historical underpinning of India-Russia relation runs deep. First and foremost, India and Russia share deep trust. India views USSR as a crisis-time ally from 1971 war to UNSC vetoes on Kashmir resolution, while the West remembers USSR as a Cold War enemy. Moreover, unlike the West, Russia has never sanctioned or pressurized or lectured India, and this is important for India and given its non-aligned stance. Over decades, Russia has supplied reliable, affordable weapons when others refuse, and that continues to be the case. While the West sees Russia through a democracy-autocracy binary, India sees it through strategic, not ideological lens. Furthermore, from entertainment to education, India and Russia share deep cultural ties. This very soft power legacy shapes how India and Indians perceive Russia with more warmth, and actually not the hostility that the West may have towards Putin today or from the past as well. In fact, apart from arms and trade, this cultural tie is about so much more. From Russia's love for Indian movies to scholarships and tourism, plenty of factors have helped the two nations maintain strong relations. Indian movies have been a part of Russian culture for over 70 years, surviving wars, political changes, even the rise of Hollywood. The love for Indian movies in Russia goes back to the 1950s, from Raj Kapoor's Avara to Mithun Chakrabarti's Disco Dancer, which became the most successful film at the box office in 1984. Another reason why India and Russia cultural ties are so strong is the student exchange. Remember, Jawaharlal Nehru Cultural Center was established in 1989 in Moscow and has been mandated with the task of maintaining India's cultural relations with Russia. About 20 Russian institutions regularly teach Hindi to 1,500 students in Russia. Apart from Hindi, languages such as Tamil, Marathi, Gujarati, Bengali, Urdu, Sanskrit and Pali are all taught in Russian institutions. Furthermore, there is general interest amongst Russians in Indian dance, music, yoga and Ayurveda. According to India's Ministry of External Affairs, the number of Indian students in Russia has increased over the years. It now stands at over 31,000 as of 2024. On the other hand, India offers a wide range of scholarships to Russian students. The Indian Council for Cultural Relations offers 4 types of scholarships to Russian students. And let's not forget, Russian literature is still taught in Indian universities with dedicated Russian studies departments. In fact, the works of renowned Russian authors like Dostoevsky, Leo Tolstoy and Anton Chekhov have all been widely read, even adapted in India. This is why possibly the hate that the West may have for Russia and Putin doesn't translate in India. And the big debate that's coming up today, even as India rolls out this red carpet for Putin, the Prime Minister himself is expected to receive him at the airport. Is this not a strategic message to the West as clear as it can get?
The energy cooperation, because of the US sanctions on Lukoil and Rosneft, there has been a dip in the imports of Russian energy to India. Perhaps both leaders could also be speaking about exploring more routes to continue this cooperation.
Defense Minister Rajnath Singh held a bilateral meeting with his Russian counterpart at the Manekshaw Center. This will be a key moment for formal discussion on future defense cooperation, including S-400 follow-on units and potential procurement of the S-500 and also Su-57.
Vladimir Putin refers to Prime Minister Narendra Modi as my dear friend.
Yeah.
And Modi has referred to Putin and Russia as an all-weather ally and a trusted friend as well.
All right, let's go across to some of our experts joining us. Pinak Ranjan Chakrabarti is former Indian ambassador to Bangladesh and former secretary of the MEA. I'll also be joined by Tatiana Kukhareva, who's a senior Russian journalist with us. Elena Chernova is head of Foreign Affairs International Division, Association of Innovative Regions of Russia, also known as the AIRR. Pinak Ranjanji, I begin with you. The latest update that we have is, as some had expected, the Prime Minister is going to be going to the airport to receive, quote-unquote, his friend, longtime ally, Vladimir Putin. What message does this send? Because a lot of people, were worried that India is walking a tightrope. But in the kind of reception that India is planning, and with the PM being there at the airport, it seems like a message is not of a tightrope, but of a very clear stand from India that we are not afraid of the message that the West is receiving from this visit.
Well, firstly, let me add a personal thing that I have received President Putin when I was chief of protocol at least 3 times when I was in the ministry.
Right.
And I remember those occasions as well. And on some of them, the Prime Minister did go to receive President Putin. So I'm not surprised that the Prime Minister is going. This happens when you want to welcome a close friend. The Prime Minister, as we say, breaks protocol. Because the protocol is a template which is normally followed, but sometimes you don't follow it to express a special kind of a sort of a welcome, which is what I think Prime Minister will be doing. And I'm not surprised because he's done it before, and I think President Putin has been, this is I think I don't know which number visit this is, 11th visit I think, after we signed the special strategic agreement in 2000. So, but it's after 4 years. So naturally, this is a very memorable occasion. And given the international situation today, it becomes even more important that...
which is why I ask, PM going there, quote-unquote, breaking protocol again. From India, the message clearly is that, we are not so worried about what the West takes from this.
Look, I don't subscribe to that. We are not sending a message to anybody. We are building a stronger foundation to a very strong bilateral relationship that we have had with Russia for decades. I mean, this is not today's relationship, and hence we are only trying to rebuild or perhaps add more blocks to that relationship that we have had for many years. So I don't think we are trying to send a message. If anybody else wants to read a message, that's their business. Really.
That's their business.
And we are not really, concerned about that. We are building and sending a message to the 2 countries and the people of the 2 countries also that we remain steadfast friends.
Yes. No, but let me then come to the the crux of the issue here. Ruslan Botnik is international affairs expert joining us, I believe, from Kiev in Ukraine. Also, Tara Karta, former director NSCS, is also with us. So, Ruslan, let me begin with you. Why is there a lack of understanding, or an insistence against India's special and long-standing relationship with Russia, regardless of the situation in Ukraine. Why is the West either failing to get it or refusing to accept it?
I think there is this very clear understanding what is going on, but the West and of course Ukraine are not ready to accept this Indian position as something true or something balanced and something leveraged. So because the formal, the public demonstration of this absence of understanding, it's methods of influence, I think, for Indian position. I'm not fully agree with my previous colleague. I think this meeting with airport is a signal for the West, especially for United States, that India's side is not only ashamed by the Putin, but also making his independent policy positioning towards the United States, especially policy, because the United States imposed the tariffs, trade tariffs to India because of cooperation with Russia. And now Indian Prime Minister is meeting Putin in so wide circumstances. It's a signal to the West, to the United States, that India is not going to be defeated, and India is not going to making some back steps even under the pressure from the West.
No, which is exactly why it seems like the West's insistence, as you put it, Ruslan, to not accept the Indian position, it's only self-defeatist. It's also, kind of souring the relationship, which was a burgeoning relationship between India and US and Europe, for example. But before I come to that, let me also go across to Tatiana, because, to expect that India would completely upend its friendship and a time-tested friendship with Russia, just because international situation has changed because of this war, was always an irrational demand. And the West doesn't seem to get it.
Well, Shivani, I can't quite agree with you in terms of it being an irrational demand on the part of the West, because that would essentially mean that the West is ready to live in a non-Western dominated world.
Right.
It hasn't been, the playbook has changed, but to expect for any US president, we talk a lot about Donald Trump being irrational or being this and that, which in fact he's not. He's just much more straightforward than, his Democratic predecessor. To expect from any American president to willingly accept the fact that it's not an American-dominated world anymore, and to accept India as an equal kind of partner, and accept the fact that there are countries, and not just India. I mean, look at the Gulf region. The countries that are very, very straightforward about the fact that they want sovereignty. They want geopolitical sovereignty. They want, and they have every right to be at the table, at a round table, not at the table where the US is at the head of the table and dictating terms. The whole narrative of it being a message to the West suggests the fact that India needs to send some sort of a message. Even that in itself, in the root, kind of means that, there is a message to be sent, because they need to show something to the US and the West.
No, I get where you're coming from, but it is only realism that there was indeed a lot of pressure on India. You are aware of it. All of us here are aware of it, of the kind of pressure India has faced. And many expected it to buckle down, because India has its own needs. It needs the US and the West as well. It cannot completely, disregard their sentiments or their concerns. But there was an expectation that India would buckle down. And I think the message from India clearly is that we haven't in the past, we're not going to in the future.
Oh, absolutely. But it's a very clear, very simple explanation, because there was pressure all around. And, because simply put, because Europe had, because Europe did kind of crumble under that pressure.
Exactly.
And but again, can we really compare countries like India to, say, Britain? Can we really compare the European struggling economies, and they are struggling. I mean, we need to face the facts. Again, the economic flagship of Europe, kind of the driver of economy in Europe, which used to be Germany, has been in economic decline for over 2 years now. And there we have India that has been growing. I mean, we need to redefine the playbook on an international level, because even the suggestion, that we have the developed countries and then we have developing countries.
Yeah. No, fair enough.
The rules have changed, though.
No, absolutely, Tarakarta. Of course, Tatiana is right in that. I mean, that indeed is the message that India is sending, right? That the West is not in the position to dictate terms to anybody anymore. Yes, India has its concerns and its needs and requirements. But one, we've never done diplomacy like this. And secondly, we're not going to start now when we're vying to become a $5 trillion economy. Ma'am, I think, yes, go ahead.
I think I would go with what Ambassador said. See, both leaders are very similar in this, in terms of having a very personal relationship. They see things through that lens. And Prime Minister Modi and Mr. Putin are known to have a very good relationship. This Prime Minister, whom I've been in his administration, he doesn't stand on protocol. When he wants to do something, he'll do it. So there's also a personal thing involved. The fact, finally, it remains that the US is your largest trading partner. I mean, we've got the most vibrant trade relationship with the US. That is not so with regard to Russia. Let's face facts. So it's not so much sending a message, but also an acknowledgement that Russia has stood by us, even recently. You remember when that Article 370, China tried their best to put it on the UN table and Russia blocked it. We've supported Russia. I mean, this is something we've done for years. It comes very naturally to the Indian establishment to back Russia, because we really have nothing against each other. This is one of those rare relationships where you're not competing with each other at all. You, in fact, sort of support each other at various times. So in that kind of a relationship where there's a degree of comfort, I'm not saying everything is hunky-dory, it's not. There is a degree of comfort with each other, which is why we've also gone in for this, we can come to that later, this logistics agreement. That's the next step. So it makes a lot of sense.
So are you suggesting, Tarakarta, that in that sense there is absolutely no trepidation, if that may be a strong word, in the Indian system, that there is going to be possibly more hit back from US or the West because of this visit?
Oh, I think there's a very clear-eyed realism that if you go in for any major defense deals, there will be a blowback. There's no two ways on that. Energy, we've already cut down. It's already gone down by, I think, about 30%, the kind of energy we've been taking from Russia. But all of this comes back to the point which Prime Minister has been making, that it is in our interests that the Ukraine war has to end. If that ends, then we can go forward with so many things. I mean, there's, apart from the very moral aspect of the thing, that Ukraine needs a break. I mean, come on, enough is enough. Right? So apart from that, the fact is our own interests are affected by the war.
Okay. So I'll come back to what could be the consequences of what happens and what is likely to happen, not likely to happen during this visit. But Elena, I want you to come into this conversation. According to you, what do you think is the message that India is sending?
Speaking on today's official visit of Russian delegation and its level, including ministers, head of government cooperation, heads of Russian banks, we expect about 10 intergovernmental agreements and more than 15 contracts to be signed. And it's a strong signal to other world that we have our private interests in such spheres as high tech, like nuclear technologies, aerospace, payments, agri-technologies, biosafety, which shows that we don't need any yes from the rest of the world, as Russia and India had a trade volume over $70 billion, and it's exceeding, and we expect it to be more than $100 billion by 2030. So we have a very strong ties, not historically, but also in education, in high tech, in culture. It's a strong ties between our leaders, and we don't need any signal from the Western countries to straightforward in our contacts.
I want to go back across to Ruslan as well. Do you think that this realization has set in that, you know, the strategy of trying to publicly bully India is not going to work? You're going to have to work behind the scenes with India if you want to express your concerns and have them on the table. But the manner in which, for example, it was done recently, that certainly seems to have backfired. Do you think there's a sense in NATO countries about this?
Maybe, but I think we are still waiting some kind of political apologies from India in the West. What I mean? What am I mean? I mean that India every time after such steps, after the meetings with Russia, with some agreements with Russia, India is trying to strengthen the connection with the West. So after this visit, I'm sure that Indian government will try to make some maybe calls or plan some visits to the West, and even maybe some additional connections with Ukraine. It was so after the last visit of India's Prime Minister to the Russia, as you remember, then was visit to Ukraine. India is trying to leverage it to balance in geopolitical arena, because India is really non-alignment state which is providing its own independence international policy. But you are right, absolutely, that this old strategy of post-colonial strategy, when we have a very dominated power which is able to put any country in the world in a special position to blame it or to demand some kind of behavior. This time in the past, and now we are living in multipolar world when no one can really make a significant fatal pressure to anyone.
Exactly. And you know, Pinak Ranjanji, what happened because of, you know, the explosion in the style of functioning of the US administration with Trump coming to power and all of this tariff that was going on, his aides talking about India in a very demeaning manner, almost trying to bully us, you know. The problem that happened was that India was working towards a deeper strategic relationship with the US. I think that was the sense in New Delhi and the excitement in India that India and US are going to power through to a long-standing, very strategic relationship. But that public stance and posturing against India, it just completely spoiled the pitch.
Well, as I was saying, that the strategic autonomy means that we would like to build relations with everybody. And we were doing it with the US as well. And because India is not a country which will choose sides or will be allied with anybody in the traditional sense that the Americans accept alliance systems, etc. They call it the treaty alliance partner and things like that, or a non-NATO partner. So India was never in that position, but we have links, very strong links with all these countries. And there is no question that India is going to choose one or the other. We will build with everybody. That was the plan, and that's what India was doing. But as you said, this public, castigating of India, etc., and things like that, has backfired. And I think they should sit back and realize that this does not work with India. I have been through the nuclear negotiations, and I know how they tried to bully us, and it didn't work. So they should go back and read those files again as to what they tried and what didn't work. And maybe there is some other way of getting India to cooperate if they wish to change their policy. So I think this is a new kind of way that the American administration, led by Mr. Trump, is trying to test out a new kind of diplomacy. Call it what you like, disruptive diplomacy, guerrilla diplomacy, or all kinds of things can be, phraseology we can invent as diplomats. But the fact is, it's not going to work. Now, the question is, when will they realize it? That's for them to realize, because if they wish India to go down on its knees, they are living in a cloud cuckoo land, is what I would say. We are willing to adjust. We are willing to adjust with everybody. That's not the point. But the point is, you don't tell us to kneel down and say, hey, look,
this is what you have to do. Exactly.
That this is what you have to do. That's not going to happen. I don't know why such experienced people in America, maybe they are not so experienced, because this is a brand new lot which has come and they have no idea, I think. I don't know whether any of them have handled foreign policy ever before. And I know many of them. I have a lot of American friends and diplomats who are my friends, and I talk to them. And they themselves tell me, we are quite mystified how they are carrying on with this kind of.
Yes. Can I coin my own term? I think it's the Jean-Claude Van Damme kind of a diplomacy.
Call it what you like.
Or Johnny Rambo kind of a diplomacy. You come in and you're going to shoot everybody, and everybody's going to either going to die.
Shoot from the hip, yes.
All the bad guys will kneel in front of you. Tatiana, what do you think? How do we describe this diplomacy?
Well, obviously, there's one thing that you can't take away from Donald Trump. I think I even posted that somewhere, that, how he is extremely talented in being able to offend over 1 billion people, with one post.
Yes.
That is beyond me. That is truly a talent. But again, this is something that the president actually spoke about. Our president has spoke about that. That India has changed so much. It's taken. It's completely changed and come into its own, and not everybody kind of got the message. That there is a sense of kind of habit in talking down to countries that some Western states are just used to having them as, former colonies. And there is a sense that they have not yet quite fully understood that this era has passed. And just as you said in the package, before our panel, this is the foundation of this relationship, putting aside the fact that Vladimir Putin and Prime Minister Modi share almost 25 years of a personal relationship, that the first time they met was, in 2001, I believe, then when Narendra Modi was the chief minister for Gujarat, right? But the fact that Russia was never a colonizer, it never spoke down to India, it was always a partner. So the difference in diplomacy is very, very clear. It was very, very clear from the very beginning. And we've come to a point of kind of no return. I mean, what Donald Trump does bluntly, Democrats do in a subtle manner, but they do it all the same.
Yeah, you're right. We don't really know what is a lesser evil sometimes, because people would argue that even a Democrat president would have tried to do exactly the same. Although under Biden, we did see the kind of bonhomie that we had never seen before as far as India-US relationship is concerned. Who knows? But certainly, and you talked about that one statement that upset 1 billion plus people, and that was the one on India-Pakistan ceasefire. And I think that one tweet has done so much damage to this relationship, and the insistence after that 20, 30 times. No Indian is ever going to agree on this, barring stray voices for political reasons. Every Indian is united as far as an India-Pakistan issue is concerned. But I believe we also have what is a flight path. All right, we'll go across to that in just a bit. But a reminder that the president is about to land in India minutes from now, shortly from now. And before I also go across to Elena one more time, Tatiana, very quickly, I wanted to get your understanding. You talked about that this is not the era where the West can dictate, but what PM Modi keeps saying is that it is also not an era for war. So what message on Ukraine do you think the Russian president would be expecting when he sits down with the Indian PM?
Look, I believe Ruslan actually mentioned this briefly, saying that there was another proposal just rejected in Moscow, which is not the case. This meeting comes on the back of President Putin's meeting with Witkoff, and there is a negotiation ongoing. So we keep forgetting that part, that from the moment that Donald Trump actually rolled the red carpet for President Putin, which we also keep forgetting, we stigmatize something. We hear stigmatizing of Prime Minister Modi for coming to the airport because it's not apparently a good idea to have the Russian president in India. But we keep forgetting that there was an actual red carpet rolled out for him in Anchorage. I believe that this visit is not about Ukraine, plain and simple. And we need to understand that. There's a lot of economic cooperation, there's the nuclear power issue, and Russia has been at the head of nuclear technology around the world. This visit is about so much more
than just Ukraine. All right. Okay, I'll delve into this a little bit more. Let me just quickly take an update from my colleagues. Arun Dhata is joining us live from the Palam airport, where the president's plane is set to land. Siddhant Mishra is outside 7 LKM, the PM's residence, where there will be a private dinner and talks today. So Arun, coming to you first up, what's the latest happening around you?
Well, that's right. I'm right outside the Palam Technical Airport, and right behind me, if you can see, this is the gate the entry gate of the Palam Technical Airport, and this is the place. And in fact, you can see this vehicle. In fact, it means that Prime Minister Modi is about to arrive here. You can see there is no traffic movement on that side near the gate. 2 minutes back, there were vehicles which were in fact flying. Now it seems that everything is stopped, which means that any moment you can see Prime Minister Modi will be reaching here. Remember, Shivani, we've been talking about the welcome which Russian President Vladimir Putin is going to get here, because Prime Minister Modi himself is coming here. He's breaking all the protocol, and this happened very few occasions. Remember in 2015, 2017, 2020, and this year itself, there was Barack Obama in 2015, Sheikh Hasina 2017, Shinzo Abe in 2017, Donald Trump in 2020 in Ahmedabad, and in 2025, Sheikh Amir of Qatar. For all of them, Prime Minister Modi had come here and welcomed them. The personal touch was given, and this time around also Prime Minister Modi is coming here any moment from now. As you've been speaking about the landing of the flight of Russian president, that can also happen any moment from now, because Prime Minister Modi is also reaching here, and Putin's flight is also expected to land very shortly. Remember, 6:35 is the time when his flight is expected to land, and then straight away from here he will be heading to 7 LKM, which is the official residence.
We'll come back to you. About 7 minutes to go as far as the landing is concerned, and Siddhant is joining us at the Prime Minister's residence. Akansha Swaroop, my colleague, is also joining us from Bharat Mandapam. Siddhant, to you first. Preparations all set. What is expected as far as this meeting at the PM's residence today is concerned?
Well, Shivani, today's meeting is very, very significant, because this meeting only takes place when a country has a very special and strategic partnership with the other country. In fact, if we talk about Prime Minister Modi, then he has hosted only selected leaders at 7 LKM. It was President Putin, then Joseph Biden, JD Vance, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, once again, he will be hosting President Putin at his official residence. This is also in reciprocity, because last year when Prime Minister Modi visited Moscow, at that point President Putin hosted Prime Minister Modi at his private mansion. Both leaders spoke for about 2 hours, and this is in reciprocity, and this is the reason that from the airport, President Putin will come straight to Prime Minister's residence, where both leaders will hold restrictive level talks. Perhaps we've been told that it will only be President Putin and Prime Minister Modi and the interpreters, nobody else. So it's an opportunity for both leaders to exchange perspectives on regional and global matters, also to discuss bilateral relationship, how to deepen the cooperation in the bilateral relationship when it comes to trade, defense, etc., etc. So today's meeting is very, very important, very, very significant, and this is happening ahead of 23rd India-Russia annual summit, which will take place tomorrow at Hyderabad House.
Yes, and what is expected at Bharat Mandapam? Let's take that to Akansha, who's joining us. Akansha, tell us more of what happens.
All right, so we are at Bharat Mandapam, and this is where the India-Russia Business Forum is happening. And today has been a very interesting day because there was a delegation headed from the Indian side by our Commerce Minister, Shri Piyush Goyal. On the other hand, you also had a delegation.
All right, Akansha, interrupting you for a brief moment. Prime Minister's carcade is visible. This is happening at the Palam airport. So the Prime Minister's carcade has reached the Palam airport. We're just about 4 minutes to go as far as the scheduled landing of the President's plane in Palam airport is concerned. The Prime Minister has, as they say, broken protocol to receive his good friend Vladimir Putin at the airport. This is, of course, a gesture between two friends and two dignitaries as much as two nations and two states. So we're going to be getting more visuals from the Palam airport again as well. Yes, Arun, any other updates? All right, we'll keep going back across to Arun in just a bit. Akansha, yes, you were saying something. All right. So the Prime Minister's carcade has reached. Arun is with us. Arun, we saw the Prime Minister's car reaching inside Palam Airport. So any minute now, we will be getting some visuals of the President's arrival.
Absolutely, absolutely. Inside the Palam Technical Airport, all the preparations are done. The entire airport is completely decked up. This is the grand welcome which Vladimir Putin is going to get. And we just saw the visuals. In fact, we are also playing those visuals right now. Prime Minister Modi's convoy has entered inside the Palam Technical Airport. And within few minutes from now, we are expecting that the flight of Vladimir Putin is also going to land in the Palam Technical Airport. And then, of course, as we've been discussing about this, that they will be straight away heading to 7 LKM. Remember, the distance from Palam Technical Airport to Prime Minister Modi's residence is barely 11 kilometers. So it will not take more than 15 minutes for both the leaders to reach there. And then, of course, at 7:30, the timing for the private dinner. But before that, of course, Shivani, we were discussing about the occasions when Prime Minister Modi, breaks the diplomatic protocol to welcome, a state head. We had seen earlier in 2015, starting with Barack Obama when he was the chief guest for the Republic Day. Then in 2017, Shinzo Abe and Sheikh Hasina. In 2020, it was Donald Trump in Ahmedabad when Prime Minister Modi reached at the airport. And this year itself, it was the Amir of Qatar when Prime Minister Modi was here. And today is again a day. And of course, Vladimir Putin is the one who's going to get that welcome by Prime Minister Modi himself. He'll of course be there at the airport when Putin will be coming down from his plane, and Prime Minister Modi will be there welcoming him, and then of course both the leaders. So these two, this visit of Putin is going to be very, very significant. Tomorrow's day, of course, is a jam-packed day for Vladimir Putin. He will be starting his tomorrow's day with a visit to Rajghat. Then of course the ceremonial welcome at the president's house, and then CEO level talks, and then the address to the CEOs, and then finally in the evening before he go back to Russia, there will be a banquet, presidential banquet for him. Shivani.
I want to go across to Sanjay Suri, my colleague, joining us from London as well. Sanjay, how is the Western media, the press, reporting, or the governments there reacting to the Russian president's visit?
Well, the Western media is necessarily hostile towards Putin and they view with suspicion anything Putin does. They have been supporting his isolation and, of course, supporting quite weakly and quite hopelessly. We've seen Putin going to the US, being welcomed by Trump in Alaska. He went to Beijing. He was welcomed there by Xi Jinping. Then now, of course, he's on his way to India and on his way to Delhi. He'll be in Delhi very shortly. So the Western media and Western governments, and by Western we mean actually particularly European and Western European rather than the US, are very keen on strong tactics against Putin, and they really want his isolation. So they have supported the sanctions against India over the oil issue. They would not like to see any communication or contact between India and Russia. We saw the three ambassadors write a letter to a local newspaper about Putin just a few days back. So they are viewing this with suspicion and a deal of hostility. There is, of course, a lot of indication that India and Russia will move forward together on many fronts: defense, the economy, the oil issue, even BRICS, of course, coming up next year with India, as it said. A lot of movement, a lot of progress expected, but the European media, the European governments are not quite welcoming that.
Yes, on expected lines, but of course, as we've been discussing, India is not seeming too fettered as far as that reaction is concerned. Whether it will elicit a bigger reaction post any announcements from this bilateral, that remains to be seen. Some of our experts seem to be suggesting that, for both India and Russia, this visit is not so much about the war and the shadow that it casts on this relationship, or for that matter on entire global politics right now. This is more about furthering our own interests, our bilateral interests in trade, tech, and also defense. But whether any major big ticket announcement will be made or not remains to be seen. There are certainly 10 pacts, 15 MOUs that are on the docket. But Pinak Ranjan continues to be with us. I wanted to understand from you too, of what message, if any, do you think PM Modi will be conveying on the Ukraine situation to President Vladimir Putin?
Well, I expect that in the one-to-one meeting and dinner, President Putin might be briefing Prime Minister Modi about the peace plan that is on the table. And a lot of that apparently is acceptable to Russia and to President Putin. But there may be some points that are not still being thrashed out. As you know, the American delegation was discussing this before Mr. Putin left for New Delhi. So that could be one factor. And the second would be, as we know from within the system, that if there are disagreements on one or two crucial things, they are bumped up to this level. And then the two leaders get together, they discuss it, and then they either reach an agreement or they say, okay, we will talk about it more later. That's the kind of thing that happens in these meetings. So there will be a very fixed kind of agenda in the sense that there will be other issues to be discussed. Both sides might raise various issues.
Visuals of a ceremonial kind of arrival for the Russian President Vladimir Putin. His flight is about to land, and very soon we will be getting visuals of his arrival. But what we can, of course, confirm to our viewers is that the Prime Minister is at Palam Airport. His carcade has reached a while ago, and he will be there on the tarmac welcoming Russian President Vladimir Putin. This is Putin's most watched, most globally watched, talked about visit to India. He has, of course, visited India multiple times in the past, almost a dozen times. But this is one that is not just being watched out closely for both of these countries, but also for the entire world. So far, there haven't been any, eyebrow-raising responses per se, but it is not left to anybody's imagination what the West, particularly NATO countries, have to say and feel about India's red carpet to Vladimir Putin. My colleague Siddhant also continues to be with us. Siddhant, very quickly, even as we wait for those first visuals of the visiting president's arrival, What has been the response that you've been getting in the diplomatic circles in New Delhi ahead of this visit?
Well, Shivani, whenever these two leaders meet, there is always chatter. There's always comments coming from the Western influencers, journalists, things like that. In fact, last time around, also when Prime Minister Modi was in Moscow, Western journalists wrote many articles, perhaps, exposing Russian invasion and writing against Russia, etc., etc. This time around, something very unusual happened, where three envoys, German ambassador, British High Commissioner, and French ambassador, wrote a piece on the Ukraine conflict and blamed Russia for it. They appreciated Prime Minister Modi's view, his efforts since the beginning of the war, but they criticized Russia, they blamed Russia for the conflict. Perhaps that piece has not been received well by the Indian government. In fact, sources in Ministry of External Affairs tell us that this is a very unusual practice. A country should not be advising the other country on how to keep relationship with the third country. So that was the message which was given by Ministry of External Affairs. In fact, Ministry has also taken note of that piece. In fact, the next day there was the piece in the newspaper from the Russian ambassador explaining the Russian reasons for launching this military operation in Ukraine.
Right.
So definitely, European world will be watching the developments very, very closely, Shivani. But also, given Prime Minister Modi's position from the very beginning, in 2022, he told President Putin that this is not an era of war. In fact, last year also, when Prime Minister was in Moscow, he told President Putin that children are
that
dying.
has been a consistent message as far as the Indian Prime Minister is concerned, and how much of that would be delivered this time around as well remains to be seen. And let me also go across to my colleague Akansha, because Akansha, while there is so much focus on the messaging that the Indian PM can do, the leaning, as they say, that the Indian PM can do on Vladimir Putin, the reality also is that these two countries have a lot to look forward to bilaterally, and that is also a focus during this visit.
Absolutely. There are two big bets right now, which is, of course, one of them being the defense partnership, the S-400s, the purchase of the Sukhoi 57, the fifth generation fighter jets. But having said that, that will also come with its own set of challenges. As I've been highlighting, in 2018, when the first set of S-400s were purchased during the previous Trump administration, we were slapped with CAXA sanctions, which are meant to particularly address any defense procurements from Russia. So that is one key concern which India will have to address if it orders a new squadron for S-400, or even say in terms of transfer of technology. Technology transfer is something which Russia specializes in, and that's not the case when we look towards defense assistance when it comes from Western nations. The other big bet, Shivani, let's not forget, is financial digital transactions. We are looking towards bringing the rupee and ruble only so that there are no third-party mediations happening. We are currently at the Bharat Mandapam, where the India-Russia Business Forum has been happening, and I can tell you from what the Russian delegation has had to say and what our Commerce Minister Shri Piyush Goyal have had to say, that we are diversifying this trade partnership, one that will not be hinging alone on just energy purchases, which oil trade particularly, which is going to dip down to its lowest in the last 3 to 4 years this December. It's going to now involve pharmaceuticals, it's going to involve fertilizers, automobile parts, and all of that is looking up. In fact, I have with me a very young Medansh, who's just 17 years old, and he's the youngest member of FICCI. Just to quickly have it from Medansh. Medansh, what is it that the youth of India and Russia can look towards now that President Putin's making that state visit?
I find it really motivating to see how Russia...
I also want to go across to my colleague Sanjay Suri, who continues to be with us. Sanjay, want to understand from you, because you've been following it since the very start of the Ukraine war. The high-pitched... All right, let me go across to my colleague Arun Dhata first, because he's there at the Palam airport where all the action is right now. We have multiple sets of visuals, Arun, that have come in. The Prime Minister reaching, there is a ceremonial guard of honor of sorts that is being prepared on the tarmac. Tell us more of what's happening.
Well, that's right. That's right. We have earlier shown that Prime Minister Modi had entered the Palam Technical Airport, and in fact, he's inside. As we've been discussing about the preparations inside the airport, completely it is decked up to welcome the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Let me quickly show you a glimpse of the Palam Technical Airport gate. There you can see now. In fact, it seems that the traffic movement is going to be stopped in a short while from. This is the gate that you see. You will be getting in a short while from now the live visuals of both the leaders coming out. And interestingly, Shivani, we'll have to see whether
all right,
both
the Prime Minister is there on the tarmac. These are live visuals coming in. His car is there. The security is there. He's now waiting inside his vehicle as the Russian President Vladimir Putin's plane lands. We are being told that plane has landed. So both of them are going to be greeting each other very, very shortly. The Prime Minister is exiting his car. And could we see both of them riding to his residence together? I think that is something that could be looked forward to, because in the past, the ride that both Putin and Modi shared became the talk of the town. So could something that be repeated on the streets of New Delhi? We'll wait and see. But these are fresh visuals coming in of the Prime Minister waiting to embrace, I'm guessing, his friend Putin. There could very well be a hug on cards and maybe, who knows, a shared ride. But these are, of course, visuals that are going to be watched very closely across the world. India is not pulling any stops as far as the welcome for Vladimir Putin is concerned. It is unfettered and unconcerned of the global eye on this visit to India. Ceremonial red carpet that has been rolled out for Vladimir Putin. Lots on the agenda, but what is really center stage is the friendship that these two nations have. And that friendship is not going anywhere, pressure from the West or NATO or not. That is going to be the signaling that both of these leaders are going to be doing as Vladimir Putin lands in India for his 30-hour visit. We are being told he has landed. Prime Minister is walking towards a certain direction now. We'll try and get a more clearer visual of what is happening there, but it seems like there could be a meeting inside. Let's see. He's gone inside some building. We'll see exactly what happens. But what we're getting to know is that President Putin's plane has landed at Palam Airport for his visit. The Prime Minister is there at the airport, almost on the tarmac, to receive his friend. And we're waiting to see exactly what transpires between these two leaders. They're going to go straight, mind you, to Prime Minister's residence, 7 LKM. And they're going to have a very private conversation there just between the two leaders. And there's going to be a dinner for the visiting dignitary at the PM's residence before the ceremonial activities begin tomorrow and all of the bilateral work happens tomorrow. There's going to be a quiet, very private meeting between the two leaders this evening. Could they share a ride together? We'll wait and see. Those pictures went viral, mind you, when they were sitting in a car together last time around. And this would be a great photo op if it happens once again. But Prime Minister Narendra Modi being there in person at the airport to receive Vladimir Putin, that in itself is, as they say, quote-unquote, breaking protocol. This is not how it's supposed to be. But Prime Minister has done this in the past when he wants to signal not just India's interest in a particular country, but also his personal relationship with the very many dignitaries that he has gone to the airport for. It has happened not just in New Delhi, but even in other states, in Gujarat, for example. And Siddhant, my colleague, also is continuing to be with us. Siddhant, any moment now, any moment, I think we could get visuals of the two leaders meeting.
Well, that's right, Shivani. In fact, you were mentioning about Prime Minister, an expert in extending special gestures. And whenever these two leaders meet, President Putin and Prime Minister Modi, there is something very unexpected that will happen. The bonhomie embraces, the hugs between the two leaders. In fact, if we talk about the Tianjin summit, Shivani, the way President Putin and Prime Minister Modi went together to meet President Xi Jinping, and then all the three leaders, had brief conversation ahead of the plenary session. Then, as you rightly pointed out, right after the Tianjin summit, both Prime Minister Modi and President Putin drove in one car to the hotel for the bilateral talks. So this relationship, this bonhomie is very, very special. And also, Shivani, all this while, since the start of this conflict, many times President Putin has briefed Prime Minister Modi on Russia's position, on how Russia is going to pursue peace, the efforts Russia is giving for peace in Ukraine, etc., etc. So, there is definitely a comfort level between the two leaders. There is definitely a very good understanding between the two leaders, and this is the reason that last time around also when Prime Minister Modi visited Moscow, there was restrictive level talks between the two leaders. In fact, both leaders exchanged perspectives on Ukraine conflict. And also, Shivani, because of this comfort level only, Prime Minister Modi is the only world leader to be sitting next to President Putin and telling him, stop the war, children are dying. So this is exactly what Prime Minister Modi said when he visited Moscow last year in July. So that's the level of comfort, and Russia is always open to discuss anything related to Ukraine conflict or global scenarios with India. So, this to celebrate this bonhomie, to celebrate this relationship, this kinship, Prime Minister Modi has once again extended this special gesture of going to the airport by breaking all protocols and to receive his friend.
This is not the first time. This is not the first time, Siddhant. This is Anand here, and good evening to our viewers as we continue on into the right stand. Whether or not will these two leaders take the right stand in the interest of global peace, harmony, and of course the global south. More importantly, what will be the interest of Bharat and Russia? That's the big question, as Prime Minister Narendra Modi, like he did for the Saudi Arabia prince, like he did for Sheikh Hasina in the past, like he has done for special leaders, he has for Donald Trump. He has gone there to show to the world that Vladimir Putin and Bharat's equation with Russia is equally important for Bharat as compared to any of the other nations, be it in the friendly neighborhood or be it from the West. But this is a special gesture. Let's remember, Arun Dhanta is there at the airport. We also have Siddhant joining us right from outside 7 LKM, that's where they will actually make their way. We must remember at Tianjin, there was a very special gesture that was extended by President Putin, where he waited for 10 minutes in his Aurus Senat, and then he brought in and hosted Prime Minister Narendra Modi in his vehicle, in his security vehicle, and they drove around for an hour. The world watched when Prime Minister Narendra Modi sat inside President Putin's car, and President Putin actually waited for 10 minutes because Prime Minister Narendra Modi was held up at that time. Now, these are fresh visuals coming through. The red carpet has been laid out. Prime Minister Narendra Modi may walk up right up to the front along with the Foreign Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar. He will be there, and President Putin will step out of the special aircraft, the presidential aircraft. Now, we will have, that's Prime Minister Narendra Modi getting off the vehicle and greeting the people present. There is a special guard of honor right at the tarmac, and President Putin will get out of the aircraft any moment now, and we should have those pictures. This is indeed a big moment, and Siddhant and Arun Dhanta with us. Siddhant, weigh in on this. The Bharat Dosti, Russia Dosti, the President Putin, Prime Minister Narendra Modi connection and them knowing each other goes back to 2001. Where we have pictures of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, perhaps as Chief Minister of Gujarat at that time, accompanying Prime Minister Vajpayee to Moscow. And at that time, it was Prime Minister Vladimir Putin. Boris Yeltsin was the president. They were sitting there signing documents, and Prime Minister Modi was present. So they go back a long way, more than 2.5 decades. Their association, their knowing each other, their friendship. And perhaps it's now ready to take it to the next level, where they have hinted at a no-limits partnership, where both nations will be committed to helping each other prosper.
Well, Yes, that's right, Anand. In fact, the sources are also telling us that wait for a few more surprises by tomorrow. So we could expect, some more surprises coming our way from Prime Minister Modi and President Putin, because till today afternoon we were expecting EMS Jaishankar to be going to receive President Putin. But, by evening it was CNN News 18 which broke the story first, that Prime Minister Modi will be going to the airport by breaking protocols to receive President Putin. Also, Anand, if you allow me, I would like to share one incident. There was a bilateral meeting which was going on between President Putin and Prime Minister Modi long back, and there was some mic issue, some translation issues. So President Putin immediately intervened and said that we don't need translators, we understand each other's language very well. So that's the level of comfort, that's the friendship and the understanding between the two leaders. And when President Putin said that, Prime Minister Modi also smiled. As I said, that there's going to be more surprises. There's going to be more gestures, unexpected gestures, which we could expect tomorrow in the national capital when these two leaders are going to meet. And this is the first visit of President Putin to India in 5 years. Today, both leaders will have a private meeting. It will only be President Putin and Prime Minister Modi in room, along with the translators, and perhaps they are going to discuss global scenarios.
That meeting, Siddhant, actually begins even as they depart the airport. For all you know, they may just travel in the same car. Whether just checking with Arun Dhanta. Arun, did you also see President Putin's cavalcade, the Aurus Senat, which has been brought down specifically for his visit here and for his local travel? Is that already inside the airport? Is it a possibility that the two leaders may actually share the same vehicle on their way out, on the way to Lok Kalyan Marg?
Well, Anand, it's going to be very, very interesting to see as to what happens, how both the leaders travel, whether they will be a redux moment, what we witnessed in Tianjin in China when President Putin waited for Prime Minister Modi and then both of them traveled in the same car. Will today again be a day when those scenes will be once again seen here? But as we are seeing that Prime Minister Modi is already inside, and we are also told that Vladimir Putin has also reached here. And Anand, let me quickly tell you that the distance from here, the Palam Technical Airport, to the 7 LKM, the official residence of Prime Minister Modi, is 11 kilometers. So the moment they come out of this gate, if you can see right now from our camera on our screens right now, is 15 to 20 minutes. 7:30 is the time for the dinner. And of course, as we've been speaking to people inside the airport, they're saying that the entire airport is glittering, completely decked up, and Prime Minister Modi, of course, ensuring, because he reached way before time inside the airport, and in fact, took a stalk around how's the preparation for the welcome of Vladimir Putin. Remember, as you've been also discussing about this, there have been very few instances when Prime Minister Modi himself had come to the airport, and this year we had seen when Amir of Qatar had arrived, Prime Minister Modi was here, and in 2020 in Ahmedabad for Donald Trump, in 2017 for Sheikh Hasina and for Shinzo Abe, and in 2015 for Barack Obama when he was the chief guest of Republic Day. So today again is the day, and that shows that how important that person is for you, who is coming to your country, and you are himself going there at the airport and waiting for him actually to arrive, and then of course the entire delegation along with you.
That 10-minute wait,
so
that 10-minute wait will go a long way. That will not be forgotten. That 10-minute wait that President Putin made in Tianjin for Prime Minister Narendra Modi to join him inside his vehicle in his car will not be forgotten. And perhaps this is also a signal to the world. We'll try and see if we have our guests this evening on the right stand to understand the import of these pictures. We should also have the live visuals coming. These are from just a short while ago. The preparations are at full tilt, and there will be the bonhomie. There will be, where do they meet and greet each other? Both leaders, will they break protocol, and will one invite the other into their cavalcade, and will they travel together, and do the conversations already then begin? Abhijit Iyer Mitra with us. Abhijit Iyer Mitra, big messaging to the world that Russia is an important partner. The West may want to sanction it left, right, right, and center and lampoon it. But Bharat stands steadfast, just like Russia has in the past with Bharat. Those are pictures of President Putin's aircraft landing. Its touchdown has happened and the taxi will happen. These are first pictures coming on CNN News 18. So the presidential plane is on the tarmac. There it is. And then it will just exit the runway, make its way to the tarmac area where officials of both the Prime Minister and the President of Russia, Prime Minister Narendra Modi's officials, and of course the Russian delegation and the Russian officials, they're all present there for this welcome. The red carpet will be laid and then President Putin will alight. But Abhijit Iyer Mitra, as we have these pictures, your thoughts?
Remember, this relationship, it is 70, 80 years old. They have always given us a veto on demand, except for that short period when Andrei Kozyrev was foreign minister. Now, Andrei Kozyrev is a rat who's now in the West sitting and talking about sanctioning Russia and things like that. So we should leave that aside as an aberration. The rest of the time, when have the Russians not come through for us? We used to keep getting moral lectures from the West, when the West had no problem supporting Pakistan with arms and sometimes sending the fleet against us to thwart our attempts at disciplining Pakistan. Russia stood by us. Now, it is not just historical value, Anand. We need to remember we can never allow China and Russia to come together. We have to keep Russia on our good side for our own interest, current interest right now. This is not past baggage we're talking about. This is present geopolitical interest that we have to keep in mind. And this is something that is current. Now, there is also things now like the S-400. I'm very certain there is an S-400 or an S-500 purchase that is going to happen. Sukhoi 27, Sukhoi 57, I don't know. Maybe, may not be. But the relationship is good. It is clear. The dynamics, the geopolitical dynamics of it are 100% solid. Because remember, Russia also can't be stuck with a monopsony market in China. It needs alternative markets for its higher value goods and things like that, which India provides.
True. Ambassador Shashank is with us, former Foreign Secretary of India, and also Surya Jayanti, non-resident senior fellow, Atlantic Council with us. My namaste and Jai Hind. Thank you for your time. Shashankji, your thoughts? How critical, how important is this visit from both Bharat and also Russia's perspective? Shashankji, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, your thoughts, please. Namaste. Anand here. Ji.
Namaste, Anand. No, I didn't hear your question. I thought you were asking someone else.
No, the question was to you.
Yes.
The importance of this visit from both Russia's perspective and also Bharat's perspective. The timing also.
It's an extremely important visit. It's taking place after 4 years. And when there have been signs that America is trying to bring an end to the Ukraine-Russia conflict, but it is finding that, firstly, the Europeans are not on board. Secondly, the American arms manufacturers are also not on board. So there is some kind of a difficulty within the American setup. So with this as the background, Russia and India are both trying to continue strengthening their relationships. This is a relationship of total mutual trust, and which has been built up over a long period of time. And the kind of technology transfers which have taken place between our two countries, they have led to a new situation where we have been talking about a joint production, joint R&D, and investments in both places. So I think these are the issues which have been talked about. Now we need to implement them. And I think keeping in mind India's Atmanirbharta campaign, we should really request this time Russia to do the technology transfer as much as possible to India.
Well, with respect to the S-500s, there is conversation around technology transfer. The S-500s are important in terms of futuristic capabilities. There's conversation around technology transfer and manufacture in Bharat of the Sukhoi 57 too. But will we get there? Because we're still expecting 2 batteries of the S-400s. That's already part of the deal. Surya Jayanti, will it be largely defense, or will there be another geopolitical import of this visit too?
This is a hugely important visit, geopolitically speaking. I think the broader background here is, and I say this speaking from Washington, D.C., and as a former US diplomat assigned to Ukraine, the broader background here is that it is not all about the United States all the time. And I think it is easy for Washington often to forget that there are countries out there that have their own long-standing relationships, their own long-standing priorities that diverge from the United States' geopolitical and economic priorities. So what Washington is watching unfold is exactly that situation now between Russia and India. And what Washington wants is, of course, a big part of the dance that's going to go on, because Modi is in a position where he needs to balance both his interests with Moscow and also his interests with Washington, D.C. But there are many aspects of this that the United States has no role in. And so I think we will see as much of a strengthening of the relationship as possible between India and Russia from this. I think it will be couched very much in rhetoric of global stability. I think India will be quite careful to make sure that it isn't saying anything inflammatory to the United States. But we are watching a little bit of a global power realignment, and the Russia-India-China shift of power from Western capitals to these Eastern countries is something that I think is rapidly unfolding, and that the Russian war in Ukraine has played a big part of. And then most broadly, or at least with respect to the balance of power between Russia and India, I think Russia needs India a lot more than India needs Russia right now. And so I think this is an excellent opportunity for India to secure some concessions in defense, some contracts in energy, manufacturing, as well as broader strategic gains.
Well, Bharat has a 70 billion import bill and just a 4 billion export bill to Russia right now. So that trade deficit needs to be balanced a bit. Nikita Menkovich, director of the Eurasian Analytical Club, is also with us. My namaste. Thank you for your time. Your thoughts on this? There are 10 GOMs that are supposed to be signed. That's not necessarily defense. What do you think will be the key focus areas, Nikita, as far as President Putin's perspective is concerned? Because there have been some placatory tones post the Witkoff meet from the Americans. There has been some indications from Mr. Peskov also, where he said that we just need a sovereign guarantee from Ukraine that they will not join NATO, and then we can immediately cease fire. Will that conversation also happen between these two leaders? Is Bharat playing a role in the Russia-Ukraine conflict? Nikita.
First of all, I'd like to underline that there is no Russian-Ukrainian conflict. It is a Ukrainian problem, Ukrainian conflict, in which Russian and Ukrainian army fighting against puppet government in Kiev. They're fighting for those land and for those freedom. That's what it is about. Of course, in this case, Russia is dealing with United States, who established and controlled so-called Ukrainian government of Mr. Zelensky. The only thing we want our land back. We want freedom for our people. We want guarantees that no new war will be produced by United States and NATO on the Ukraine territory. Of course, we doesn't want to see there NATO troops, American soldiers, American occupation. That's all about. Please don't talk about so-called Russia-Ukrainian conflict. A lot of Ukrainian people fighting against American mercenaries in Russian troops. Russian and Ukrainian people are allies against NATO aggression. You should remember it.
It's also about the narratives and perspectives from either side. And one of the things perhaps that Bharat can learn is how to shed the Western narrative and to try and pursue a narrative that is important to the country. The Russians seem to be doing that very focused and ably, and have negotiated a huge gamut of sanctions and financial distress to continue to sustain themselves. But Farwa Amer, Director of South Asia Initiatives, Asia Society Policy Institute, would you agree with Nikita, Surya, or would you have a different perspective itself on the import of this visit, the connect between these two leaders, and more importantly, the Bharat-Russia dosti? Can this move to that no limits description that was hinted at by Mr. Peskov?
Thank you for having me. I do agree with what Surya said. It is important for India to value and to keep continuing to support its partnerships both with Russia and with the United States. Of course, this has been a challenging year for the US-India relationship. There's the trust deficit that has developed, and this visit is coming at a very delicate time because of the US sanctions and the tariffs and the trade deal that is on the table between the United States and India. And there's been a decrease in the crude oil imports that had seen a massive increase and was something notable for the United States between India and Russia. So now when this visit is going to happen, it's going to be one where India would want to make sure that the overall relationship, despite these differences that have emerged because of the sort of curbing the oil imports in light of the US sanctions and to comply with some of the US demands, and in terms of securing its relationship with the West, it will be to also make sure that the relationship with Russia stays stable and steady. One of the biggest narratives coming out of India is to expand this relationship and take it beyond defense and oil, and to try and make it more broadly economic, sort of one where there is room for more technological cooperation. There is room to do more on the civil nuclear cooperation side and collaboration side. There's one labor mobility agreement that's likely going to be signed as well. So, to engage more from a people-to-people perspective. So how can you take this relationship and make it a little bit broader to kind of maintain that status of this privileged and strategic partnership? Of course, this has been a testing time for India because this year has sort of laid out how much strategic flexibility there is for India in this rapidly evolving geopolitical order that we are seeing, not just with how India is engaging with Russia in light of what's coming out of the West and Western policy uncertainty towards India, but also how it's kind of stepped up even so cautiously in terms of its engagement with China. When Prime Minister Modi was in China after 7 years for the SCO, that event in itself also had reactions come out of Washington. So there is room, however, to see to kind of make sure that both relationships can somehow remain in parallel and do well if there's progress on the Ukraine negotiations, peace negotiations.
Well, there may be territorial disagreements. There would also be an adversarial thought process between China's machinations under the CCP and the PLA vis-a-vis Bharat. But when a nation like and under the leadership of Donald Trump tries to weaponize trade, then can other nations set aside their territorial ambitions and look at how they can use economics, they can use trade to perhaps defang bullies? Is that a possibility, Shashankji? But if it comes to Bharat and Russia, then there has to be a rupee-ruble agreement. Because you can't base it on the dollar if Russia continues to be sanctioned and Bharat continues to be threatened with sanctions if it continues to buy oil. Although it's hypocritical that nations in Europe, America itself continues to trade with Russia, be it fertilizers, oil, energy, etc.
Yeah, I agree with you that America has been putting unilateral tariffs on India, which is quite unfair. But India has to see that, well, they have not put these tariffs on China, Europe, and on itself. And therefore, we have to ensure that whatever oil and other energy resources we buy from Russia, we should use it for ourselves, number one. Secondly, we should go for technology transfer, because that will be strengthening the Atmanirbharta campaign of India. Thirdly, as you said, that we have to make arrangement for rupee-ruble trading directly, whichever way it is possible, either by more investments by Russia and India, by choosing a larger gamut of imports from India, or asking Indian companies to invest in Russia. Also, as you said, labor movement might be there because apparently Russia is short of technical manpower, skilled manpower, and the labor, and they would very much like to have a large number of people from India. So I think these are all issues which are necessary. China, of course, they have their own territorial ambitions, but China has been telling India for a long time that China and India are both civilizational powers in Asia, and we can delay our contest for a later time. In the meantime, if we build up our economic capacities, our technical capacities, then we might be able to see that Asia has a better role to play in the world relationships. So I think with what America is doing right now, that is making it possible for India to look at the Chinese advice much more positively, which we were not doing earlier, because earlier our foreign minister had been saying that let us first sort out the border issues, and then we will come to the other parts. But now I think that the Americans are putting unilateral sanctions on India, but while leaving out China or many other countries from this. So therefore, India has to see that, well, we also build up our ties with China to the extent possible, and also with Russia, which of course are very, very important ties for us.
Yeah, but the thing is, the Chinese state can afford to take some strong decisions. They, 2 months or 1.5 months, they stop importing soya bean. And the Americans immediately looked at that $10 billion bill and immediately, calmed down. So there were certain weapons, again, trade, the amount of debt that the Chinese absorb of the American debt, all of that also weighs in with, Trump trying to look at Bharat and not at China. The red carpet laid out, flying Kremlin is on the tarmac. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will walk up as soon as there is a signal, and we'll have to read the language between the two leaders. Pictures speak 1,000 words. The Prime Minister's gesture, waiting for nearly half an hour at the airport at the tarmac, reaching well on time. Abhijit Iyer Mitra, is this Bharat's way of saying thank you for the Tianjin gesture? Is that one? Secondly, the way these two leaders will meet, greet, and how they depart. If they depart in the same car, irrespective of whether it is the Prime Minister's vehicle or President Putin's vehicle, towards 7 Lok Kalyan Marg, will also send a few signals.
So, look, this was an annual visit that used to happen. The Indian Prime Minister went there 1 year. The Russian president would come here 1 year. It just hasn't happened for the last 4 years because of the Ukraine war. And the second thing is, it was very curious. I was talking to air traffic control earlier today. Even the chief air traffic controller had not been told what time the plane would be landing. So there were a lot of security concerns that the Russians had flying over neutral, even over neutral airspace. I believe that this particular flight path has actually gone through military flight routes, not through the civil flight routes. And I don't know how the final coordination was done with the ATC and when the flight plan was given, because till this morning, Delhi ATC sure didn't know what time the plane was going to land.
They kept it very guarded. President Putin is just about to step out. Abhijit Iyer Mitra, just staying with the pictures. There you go, thanking the captain of the ship as he steps out. And President Putin is stepping down. He's coming down, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi has walked right up there to the base of that those steps to receive President Vladimir Putin. There you go, as he steps down, walks up 10 steps, and there you will see Prime Minister Narendra Modi walking towards him. The big handshake and the big embrace. Lots of smiles between the two leaders. This is the long camera as Prime Minister Narendra Modi is walking slowly towards the red carpet. They meet halfway on the red carpet. Big warm embrace between the two leaders. Lots of smiles, lots of conversations. Clearly, both of them can converse in English, and that's what's happened. A short conversation in English as both of them walk together. The formal introductions to the delegates and the reception party, that's what's going on at this point, as all the members of the PMO, the External Affairs Ministry, the joint delegation, both sides, the Russian, Indo-Russian counterparts, all of them stand there. That's the welcoming party that's being introduced, and then a handshake and greeting that's happening. And thereafter, this will be interesting to see. Which way do they move? Do they go in separate vehicles towards 7 Lok Kalyan Marg? They're all standing there for a photo op. Clearly, President Putin in good spirits, all smiles. The security, as Abhijit Iyer Mitra had said, they've kept all the details very guarded. There is a welcome dance and a performance that's being made. 5 or 6 dancers performing traditional Indian classical dance form. And this looks like Bharatanatyam. And so the performance there as both leaders pause on the and that's the white vehicle. Now we'll have to see if they're all leaving together. We'll try and go across to those pictures and see if the leaders are departing together in the same vehicle. That means then the conversations, the broad contours of the conversation would have already begun. Yes, they are stepping in together. They are stepping in together. They are going together. There you go. The import of this is important. This looks like the president's vehicle. The president's vehicle in which Prime Minister Narendra Modi is also seated. The president sitting right behind the chauffeur, the driver's side, and Prime Minister sitting to the president's left. And the two leaders are already conversing. The SPG, the Russian security protocol, all of them sitting there. There are pictures that are being taken of the two leaders, and we'll have those pictures also being released in a bit. But Shashankji is with us. This is significant. After Tianjin, the second time the two leaders are traveling in the same vehicle. This is very rare. Shashankji, can you hear me?
I can hear you. So there is a very time constraint is there. They have to discuss. There's so many issues of great importance for bilateral relations and for the global situation as it is evolving, and issues of war and peace, that I think it's important that they should discuss this in the cars in a safe environment and take every opportunity to express their thoughts to each other.
But this is quite rare. This doesn't happen often. Surya Jayanti, Nikita Menkovich with us. Nikita Menkovich, this will be important. The Russians will be watching this. There is a show of fist and then, of course, something symbolic. There's a conversation that's happening. We can see the Prime Minister quite animated. But this is important. President Putin doesn't do this often with many leaders. Nikita.
This meeting is really important for both countries. For a long time, we had been main partners as Soviet Union and India. Now we're coming back to that level of relationship. Of course, for my honor opinion, not the more important what two leaders are showing now, but what they are going to discuss. But the thing with you demonstrate us that nothing spoils this meeting and this dialogue between our two countries. It shows that both Putin and Modi demonstrate confidential and respect for each other. It is a good base for dialogue and for future partnership in economy, in defense, in the military projects. I hope that also IT, science and other fields will be a topic of our dialogue and next.
I'm just going to interrupt you because we're getting pictures from Arun Dhanta's camera. Arun, you're just at the point where the two leaders are departing in the same car, same vehicle together. So similar to Tianjin, it's a white color vehicle that should come your way any moment now. Arun, talk us through what you see.
That's right, Anand. You can see the convoy, the first car of the convoy is coming out. In fact, this is the protocol car that you see. The gate is open. This is the Palam Technical Airport, and you can see now there's a glittering vehicle. This is also a protocol vehicle coming from inside the Palam Technical Airport. We just saw, in fact, we're seeing those deferred visuals of inside the airport, and now you can see that one after the other, these protocol cars are coming, and any moment on this camera,
it'll be a white vehicle. It'll be a white colored vehicle.
Yeah, of course, this is the entire convoy. Now, Anand, you can see all these vehicles now coming out from the Palam Technical Airport. You can see these visuals on your screen as we've been discussing.
There you go. That's the white vehicle.
11-kilometer journey from here to 7 LKM, and it will not take more than 15 minutes for this entire convoy to reach at Prime Minister Modi's residence. You can see this entire entourage moving away from the Palam Technical Airport as we were witnessing the visuals of the inside, the welcome dance, the traditional dance there. And
right,
the
so the cavalcade has left you, and we saw a little bit of a freeze in the pictures, the live pictures, because of the jammers that are in place. Huge amount of security, viewers, that have been put in place for President Putin's visit. And this is again breaking protocol. But Nikita Menkovich saying, I'm going to focus, we need to focus on what they will discuss. But the conversation has already begun. Surya Jayanti, will the White House also be watching? Will Europe leaders there also be watching the intensity of the conversation, the bonhomie between the leaders, the gestures that are extended? All this is also subtle messaging somewhere. Or would everybody look at, say, all right, this is optics. Let's look at the brass tacks. Let's look at what's being signed, what's being agreed on.
I think it is always easy to read a lot into the optics. They are an indication of a warm relationship and therefore important. I think Washington is probably going to ignore most of the optics, however, and wait to hear what the substance is. The main issue for Washington here is that Russia has made itself something of an international pariah by invading Ukraine, and as a consequence has faced strong sanctions over the last approaching 4 years. And therefore, what Putin needs out of this visit is a great deal. And I think there is a considerable power imbalance at the moment between Russia and India. Russia needs India much more than India needs Russia. And that's why you see President Putin really making an effort to show respect and show honor and project those diplomatic cues that you were just speaking about. Because Russia finds itself in a difficult position. One, it remains a mostly international pariah, but two, indications are that its economy is in recession, its budget is usually over 33% reliant on oil and gas revenue, and although its export numbers have not actually dropped, its revenue numbers are down 34% this year. It needs India. And so it has come to pay homage, and to some extent, it's come to beg. And so I think this is a great opportunity for India to secure some very solid economic benefits from the relationship.
Farwa Amir, I know you're pressed for time. Quick word. Farwa Amir has left. Just quick word from Siddhant, who's at 7 Lok Kalyan Marg. The cavalcade is headed his way. In exactly about 10 minutes, they should be there. Siddhant, the import of this... many experts believe Russia needs India more at this point than the other way around. What is Bharat's approach going to be? You've been speaking to a lot of people. What's being worked in terms of behind the scenes? What's the focus on?
Well, the focus will be mainly on the bilateral issues, Anand. The biggest concern for the Indian government is the trade deficit. In fact, Russian side also acknowledges this concern. In fact, the business forums from India and Russia have been meeting from last 24 hours to find out plan to reduce this trade deficit. Now, India also wants the buyer-seller relationship as far as fertilizer exports from Russia is concerned to go beyond the buyer-seller relationship. That is also something which is on the agenda. The most important agreement, Anand, is going to be the Mobility Pact, which both India and Russia are going to sign during this visit of President Putin. Both sides have been working from last 1 year to get this agreement finalized, and now we've been told that agreement has been finalized, and it will be signed tomorrow in presence of the two leaders. So now young Indian talented skilled professionals will be going to Russia to work. So this is something very new introduced in this relationship, and this is one big takeaway perhaps which we could expect in the official document tomorrow. So as you rightly said, Anand, in 10 minutes from now, Prime Minister Modi and President Putin will be reaching 7 Lok Kalyan Marg. Also, Anand, there needs to be a new word coined for this car diplomacy, because each time around these two leaders meet, they also do car diplomacy. They did car diplomacy in Tianjin. Now for the second time they are doing car diplomacy. Nobody knows what they're going to talk.
There is any car diplomacy here, but if I may pinch a word from the times of yore from Indian cinema, this is a Jai Viru on the same bike, and it's two friends trying to get a ride together and get some conversations in. This time it's not a motorbike, but it's a car, and it's a phenomenal gesture to show that irrespective of the ebbs and the flows and also the highs and the troughs, peaks and the troughs, their equations will not change, and they will continue to partner with each other and maintain this friendship. That respect is something that needs to be underlined, and the gesture, the Prime Minister going back and sitting in that car, it's the Prime Minister of the country. There is no ego there, saying that, all right, you're the visitor, it's your security vehicle, but I will sit there, let's break protocol, it doesn't matter. And I think somewhere this half an hour, 40-minute wait is also important, because the Prime Minister understanding the import of President Putin, waiting for him in Tianjin on the sidelines of the SCO when Prime Minister Narendra Modi was held up, and President Putin's cavalcade waited for a whole 10 minutes before Prime Minister boarded the Orasanat there. Let's try and go back to Shashankji and try and understand. Do you agree with Surya Jayanti when she says that this time around President Putin and Russia require Bharat more than the other way around?
I think we should not really look at it from this angle. I'm quite sure that the scholars in the West would try to see who is getting what from the other side and who can put more pressure on the other side. I think this is a relationship of mutual trust, friendship. And what we are trying to do is to move it from the buyer-seller relationship to a relationship of joint development and joint R&D. And I think technology transfer wherever it is possible. So I think there are so many more issues which are there. And above everything else, there is our trade deficit, which is very, very huge. So how do we take care of it? I mean, we can't simply say that, all right, we'll pay you in renminbi or in UAE currency. Therefore, we have to find some way out so that the rupee-ruble trade can be carried out. And if you remember, at a time when the Russians were going through a very difficult time, then India agreed to have the rupee-ruble trade at a rate which was very favorable to Russia at that time, not the international rate, but I think at the rate which the Russians wanted, more or less at that level. So it's a question of mutual trust. I think it's not a question of who can get what from the other side.
It's about I help you, you help me. Viewers, this labor mobility or people mobility is a huge opportunity, because Russia is quite far advanced in terms of technology, in terms of medicine, in terms of medical advancements, research and development, etc. As you touch down in Moscow, the airport is not so impressive, but the moment you exit the airport, it's beautiful. And Moscow is a beautiful city. I've been there. And, they may be very strict, but they are always very, very friendly. They break into a smile the moment you say that you're from Bharat. And they have a few songs and a few representative references, which almost every other Russian would be able to tell you. You can figure your way out. But thing is that we don't look eastward. We don't go, largely the traffic has been westward. Abhijit Iyer Mitra, will that change now? Is that possible? And from tourism itself, can there be more to gain for Bharat?
We've seen a change in Russian attitudes ever since the war in Ukraine started. I want to remind you, Russia is no longer the Russia it globalized long back. It's no longer what Indians remember of Raj Kapoor songs being sung and things like that. In fact, till the invasion of Ukraine, Russia TV was particularly hostile to India. They used to carry Pakistani propaganda throughout. They used to interview Kashmiri separatists. They used to take their coverage of India was virtually indistinguishable from Al Jazeera. And we know that was pretty much controlled from the Kremlin itself, because RT doesn't really have an independent editorial line. If you take, irrespective of what Margarita Simonian says. That has changed. I think Russia now realizes who its friends are and who its friends aren't. It's a delicate balancing game that India has to play. But look, we've balanced this very, very well. Even when Trump imposed sanctions on India, tariffs on India, not sanctions on India, the linkage to Russian oil was very, very tenuous. Remember that. That came much later. The initial threats of tariffs and things like that were purely about the trade imbalance. So even the Americans, the victory of Indian foreign policy here is that India's security relationship and foreign policy relationship with Russia has never been called into question, even by the Americans.
Right. Now, we've just got Sputnik putting this out, citing the Kremlin, saying Prime Minister Narendra Modi's decision to meet President Putin at the aircraft ramp was unexpected and that the Russian side had not been informed in advance. That's what Kremlin is saying. So this is clearly a surprise move, a gesture that's happened last minute. Traffic has been stopped outside 7 Lok Kalyan Marg. Let's go across to Siddhant. He should be, the cavalcade should be arriving or entering 7 Lok Kalyan Marg any moment now. Siddhant, again, Kremlin saying that this was not informed, that Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be coming to the tarmac. So this was not advance notice. So this has been taken, this decision has been taken at the nth moment. Is it part of, a few surprises that are in store? And given the amount of security and the kind of secrecy that's been kept over the entire itinerary of President Putin in his visit to Bharat?
Well, that's right, Anand. In fact, till today afternoon, in fact, my sources were also indicating that EM S. Jaishankar will be the minister in waiting for President Putin. But it was CNN News 18 which broke this story first, that Prime Minister Modi will be going to the airport to receive President Putin. In fact, Anand, right now we are at 7 LKM. The traffic on both sides of the road have been stopped, and we could expect the cavalcade to be entering 7 Lok Kalyan Marg any moment from now, or rather the cavalcade has already entered, because we cannot see the cavalcade entering from the location where we are placed, stationed. But all we can tell our viewers is that the area has been cordoned off, the traffic has been stopped, and I could also see some of the vehicles coming to the front gate of 7 Lok Kalyan Marg. So both leaders are going to sit for the informal talks. It's only going to be Prime Minister Modi, President Putin, and yes, there you see, Anand, the cavalcade has arrived, and we can now officially say that the cavalcade of President Putin and Prime Minister Modi has reached 7 Lok Kalyan Marg after dropping the leaders inside. Yeah, and if I could request my camera person to pan and give shots to our viewers, the scene outside the 7 Lok Kalyan Marg. In fact, we could see the cars.
Yeah, he needs to raise the camera up a little. He needs to lift it up a bit. Lift, and you need to move out of the frame. Move out of the frame, lift it up a bit, and that's when we can see what's behind. Yeah.
Yes, that's right, Anand. So, the cavalcades, few cars have come to this side, the front gate of the 7 Lok Kalyan Marg, and we can officially confirm that President Putin and Prime Minister Modi.
Can you ask your VJ to raise his camera a bit, if you can lift the tripod up a bit, please? Yeah.
I would ask my VJ to raise his camera. There is very little space, Anand, from where we are reporting outside 7 Lok Kalyan Marg. So I really apologize that.
No, this is better. This is better. It's just because of the leaves. It's better now. Yeah, you're live on. You're on live. Go ahead, please. Yeah, stay on these pictures. Yeah.
Yes, Anand. So we can say that both leaders have reached. In some time from now, the informal conversation will begin at 7 Lok Kalyan Marg. And Anand, it will only be Prime Minister Modi and President Putin along with the interpreters, nobody else. So it is in reciprocity, because last time when Prime Minister Modi was in Moscow, President Putin hosted him at his mansion, and both leaders spoke for about 2 hours. So we could also be expecting that President Putin will be briefing Prime Minister Modi about his meeting with the Americans yesterday with
the Witkoff meeting.
Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff. Yes. So in all likelihood, President Putin will definitely be briefing Prime Minister Modi, will be discussing as far as Ukraine conflict is concerned. In fact, Prime Minister will also be sharing his perspective, because Prime Minister has.
We're going to pull away. We're going to pull away from you, because these are pictures to the right, viewers, which are coming from the tarmac. Those are pictures live right outside 7 Lok Kalyan Marg. The leaders are already inside, and the PMO will be releasing pictures from inside any moment now. It should be on the social media handles of the Prime Minister, or it will come on the on the national broadcaster Doordarshan any moment, and we'll cut to those pictures when it comes. Just quickly going across to Nikita Menkovich. And Nikita, this entire issue with Ukraine, is this weighing in on Russia? Are there entities who don't want this conflict to be resolved and for peace to or for there to be ceasefire? Can Bharat play a role here? How does Russia view this?
As I said before, the main problem is that Russian land is occupied by foreign forces. I mean NATO mercenaries, so-called Ukrainian army. Also, Ukrainian land is also under control of United States puppet government. Of course, the only possible solution of this conflict is NATO going back, leaving Russia and Ukraine alone. It is our leave or do it or die. It is our quit India campaign, which you did a long time ago to make your country free. The same situation is now. Ukrainian and Russian people don't want to be American or British slaves. We are doing our best. Of course, we would prefer a peaceful decision. We would prefer the stop of this conflict, NATO troops going away from our territory, and Ukrainian people will get a freedom to elect those future without Zelensky, without NATO, without American dictatorship. But as we see now, a lot of politicians at the West are not ready for such way finishing of the conflict. They continue producing weapons, money, and mercenaries for so-called Ukrainian army to continue aggression against Russia and Ukrainian people. So, of course, we're doing our best in diplomacy, but we still have no choice but to fight at the battlefield for our freedom and for our future. It is the situation.
Well, Nikita Surya Jayanti had an interesting perspective where she said America has got a bit of a problem, especially the White House, because there are entities who do not want this war to end, who want the conflict to continue or the fight to continue. How would you read this before I bring in Ambassador Shashank? Yes. Is this the critical aspect? Can Bharat play a role where somewhere both sides agree that Ukraine will not join NATO? That's the first step for ceasefire. And then perhaps de-escalation. Surya.
Before I answer your question directly, I think I should just say that the magnitude of patently false gibberish that your guest from Moscow has just spewed is so astonishing that I don't even know where to start factually unpacking it. But the fact that he is spouting propaganda that disingenuous is itself an indication of the degree to which the ongoing issues caused by Russia in Ukraine are important to the dynamic that we're seeing here. I think one could overstate the degree to which Washington's interest in India and India's relationship with Russia has to do with Russia's ability to continue to prosecute its war in Ukraine. I think, as another one of your guests said a lot earlier, the justification of Indian oil purchases as somehow funding Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine came after and is not particularly convincing. So it is a complicated moment for the United States because the United States has argued a number of inconsistent and fairly incompatible priorities. On one hand, it is trying to force a profoundly disadvantageous so-called peace on Ukraine. On the other hand, it's slapping additional oil sanctions on Russia. It doesn't add up to a particularly meaningful path forward to a solution. And I think all of this matters because the situation that Russia has found itself in by virtue of its international aggression is adequately isolated and adequately economically crippling, that although Russia's economy has remarkably defied expectations of collapse with the initial sanctions now going back almost 4 years, it is nonetheless in a very difficult position, and it really does need a lot of labor to come in. And so you speak about the Mobility Pact, for example. Russia has a massive demographic problem. It's lost over 1 million people on the front line and casualties of various kinds. There's been mass exodus by people trying to avoid the draft and trying to avoid the crush of sanctions. So Russia has a demographic and a labor problem. It really needs Indian workers. It also really needs India to continue buying Russian crude. Although Russian crude levels have not actually decreased, the export levels, the amount of money that Russia is getting has dropped 34% since the United States put tariffs on India and then since the October additional sanctions on Russian oil companies like Lukoil. And so it's becoming a more complicated economic relationship for India. I think the political relationship is something that India has managed quite well, considering that its priorities are not the priorities of the United States, but it does need to balance its relationships on both sides.
Yeah,
so the Indian strategic autonomy approach has been very wise.
Right, but Shashankji, we've got Sati Kazanova also with us, and Sati, I'll come across to you after a quick word with Shashankji. There is a neutral perspective, or perhaps there is a different perspective to this entire, there is what Nikita would say and what Surya would agree or disagree. One aspect is the word Ukraine itself means borderlands. So clearly this was the erstwhile border area for the Russian territory. Vladimir Putin is born not so far away from where Volodymyr Zelensky is born. So there is a history there. The other thing is it's the NATO that's expanded eastward, and 20 years ago this was flagged off by Putin, and this is on record that the NATO should not move eastwards towards Russia. That's one part. The other thing is the only warm water access are the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea for the Russians. There is no other warm water access. NATO moving into the Black Sea means the warm water access stops. So this is one part. The other part is the entire Donbas region, which is largely Russian-speaking, and Russia has alleged that the CIA worked the machinations for the government overturn, compared to what the West would say that Russia was trying to supersede its own people and superimpose its authority over Ukraine. Now, how do we view this, and where is the solution? Because both sides have to agree on a solution. The nation that suffered the most amongst all of this is Ukraine. It's totally destroyed. Ukraine is the bread basket or the wheat basket to the world. It's also the fertilizer hub. There are a lot of contributions Ukraine made to the world.
I agree with you that Ukraine people have suffered the maximum, and that is because the NATO countries, they felt that they would be able to support Ukraine to the extent that Russia just collapses or Russia just gives in. And that was their initial expectation, which has not materialized. In fact, more and more American scholars are now talking about the Russians trying to go into not only Crimea, but also Odessa, and to gradually convert Ukraine into a landlocked state. So therefore, what is happening is in Ukraine is we have to keep in mind that something similar was also being tried by the NATO countries when they wanted Quad to become an Asian NATO, as Russia and China had started talking about that. Then India would have been like the Ukraine of Asia, where Taiwan and China would not have fought, but India would have fought on behalf of Taiwan, with as we fought in First World War and Second World War and lost 70,000-80,000 people in both wars. So I think that is why Indian people are very reluctant, and they want peace to come into Ukraine. They want peace to come in Europe, because whenever there is conflict in Europe, it has led to problems in all over the world. So I think we have to be careful with that, that this time we are trying to bring about a balanced relationship of peace with China. And we are seeing, as Abhijit Iyer Mitra said, that Russia should not feel compelled to play the second fiddle to China. And then we have, of course, the global south. We have our friends in Brazil, South Africa, we have IPSA. So we hope that we would be able to put across the views of the global south more effectively in the BRICS forum and other forums which are there in the interregional levels.
Right, there's a lot to talk about, but there's also a dinner spread in a short while from now. So are they going to keep the official aspects on the side and also exchange some personal notes and share some non-work moments as two great leaders and of two big nations? That we have to wait and watch. I thank all our other guests, but I'm going to quickly go across to Satani Kazanova, who's with us. Sati, thank you very, very much. Namaste. How do you see...
Namaskaram.
Namaskaram. And how would you view President Putin's visit?
If you don't mind, I would not speak from a political point of view, as I'm not politician, I'm musician, and I'm just so happy that our cultures, our countries building their friendship and relationships stronger, deeper, and of course the cultural side is very fundamental for our countries, because India and Russia, we have way more common points than we could think, such as values, as family, spirituality, and someone says that, you know, the Western world is very focused on artificial intellect, as long as India and Russia, they focus on the spiritual intellect. And I really like that expression and this idea. So I think that is the very important boundary between our countries. And if we will focus on that, I believe we could build beautiful relationship, because as I love India and I come so often to India, and now I'm even learning on the faculty of Indology. I'm learning Sanskrit and all the things.
Wow.
So yeah,
because what you just said is so rooted in Indian philosophy, Bharatiya Sanatan philosophy, Hindu philosophy, if I may say. So how did you get to know about this? What's your bond with Bharat? How did it happen?
All happened through my guru. His picture, by the way, behind, and my guru Paramahamsa Vishwananda. I met him 13 years ago. And since that moment, I started initiated, and he just gave me all this knowledge. And after all these years, I understood it more than just thing I like. This is the really the root and sense of my life. So I consider myself as a Vaishnava. So it's just more than style of life. So that's why I decided to go to the University of the Friendship University to learn for Hindu Indology. And
are there many in Russia who are drawn towards Indology or Hindutva or Hinduness? The Vaishnava philosophy?
No, unfortunately not many, because it's quite deep topic. You have to really dive. You know, Western world, they're charmed by yoga, but it's such a small part of the great and deep philosophy. So for example, now reading Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, I understand it's so artificial how the understanding of Western world of yoga itself, even the meaning of the word, we don't know. I mean, in the Western world.
True. Let me also ask you. You said that we should call ourselves Bharat, not India. Why do you say that?
Definitely, yes.
Why do you say that?
Because it brings back to your own root, to own values and power.
I remember, so you believe that we should call ourselves Bharat in any language, and that's the better way to refer to ourselves.
Yes, I believe it will bring you back to that original source, to your power. Because originally, India was not called India. It happened through Arabic and British people because of geographical location. So those who live nearby or behind the river Hind, those were called Hindi, Sindhu, Hindi, whatever.
Yeah, Al-Hind.
So, yeah, Al-Hind, that's how it happened. So it's not your original name. And I think it's time to come back. And it's a beautiful, soft revolution or evolution of your culture.
Well, Sati, if I may call you that, in 2018, I believe Prime Minister Narendra Modi showed President Putin something, and that involved you. So I'm going to request you to sing that for us. Mahatma Gandhi's favorite bhajan.
Yes, very short part of that. And it's also a favorite bhajan of my Gurudev, and that's how I even was familiar.
So will you sing that for us, please?
Vaishnava jana to tene kahiye je peed paraye jani re. Vaishnava jana to tene kahiye je peed paraye jani re. I think that's enough.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, and we look forward to you joining us in our studio the next time you're in Delhi, next time you're in Bharat. Thank you so much for your time, Satani Kazanova. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
Namaste.
Namaskaram.
Well, these are the pictures, viewers, of President Vladimir Putin arriving in Bharat just a short while ago. He was given a warm welcome, an embrace of welcome from Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and Kremlin says they did not know. President Putin was made aware only after the flying Kremlin touched down at the Palam Air Base, and now these two leaders are already at 7 Lok Kalyan Marg. They traveled together in the vehicle that was supposed to ferry only the Russian president, but both of them traveled together. So a repeat of the Tianjin moment again. And now what's going to be on the conversation, not just over dinner, but perhaps what's been spoken in those first 15 minutes, that will also have huge import. Zaka Jacob takes it forward.
Welcome to our continuing coverage here on CNN News 18. What a moment this is. The Prime Minister a short while ago arriving at the Palam airport to receive his friend Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, both of them riding in the same car, and they've now reached the Prime Minister's residence at 7 LKM, where there will be a private dinner that the Prime Minister will be hosting for the Russian president. And more importantly, there will be, of course, the restricted meetings that will happen as well. So after which the president will go to the ITC Moria where he's staying, and then tomorrow is the business end of his visit. Let's just bring you up to speed with the images that we've seen already. Just about 30 minutes or so after President Putin touched down, Prime Minister broke protocol, went to the Palam airport to receive his friend. You can see him there at the tarmac, at the red carpet, welcoming President Putin. The Kremlin says they had no idea that Prime Minister Modi was coming to receive President Putin. Both of them, it's a warm hug, a warm embrace, and then they walk down that red carpet, and both men then, of course, share the same car. It is an Indian car. It is part of the security protocol team for the Prime Minister. Both of them took a moment to try and savor the Indian cultural performance. There was a troupe of women dancers performing the Bharatanatyam, so that happened. They took a few moments to savor that in, and then thereafter, both Prime Minister Modi and President Putin walk up to this car, this security cavalcade car that's part of the Prime Minister's security protocol. Both of them ride in that same car and head towards 7 LKM, the Prime Minister's residence, where, of course, the Prime Minister is hosting the Russian president, the visiting head of state, in a private dinner followed by restricted talks. And then President Putin leaves for the ITC Moria, where he's staying at the presidential suite for the next 24 hours. So these pictures from the Palam airport, and in a few moments we will get the pictures from 7 LKM as well, where the Prime Minister is hosting the visiting dignitary, the visiting head of state, the president of Russia. Clearly, this is a big moment as far as both India and Russia are concerned, because it comes at a moment of extreme geopolitical flux, at a time of geopolitical rebalancing, if you will, as far as both India and Russia are concerned. The Trump tariffs on India for importing Russian oil have really upended the relationship between India and the United States. It's also upended India's traditional relationship with Russia. Why Russia and India click? I think that's an important one to look at, because Russia supported India all through the Cold War, particularly in the 1971 war, in the liberation of Bangladesh. Kashmir vetoes. Every time Kashmir has come up at the United Nations Security Council, it has always been Russia that has backed India. There are defense routes. Remember, more than 50% of India's defense inventory, even today, even after diversification, even after Atmanirbharta, more than 50% of India's defense inventory is Russian origin, whether it's your tanks, your fighter jets, your missile defense systems. There's also old civilizational ties. Both the countries have had independent worldviews. India prides itself for its strategic autonomy, and Russia, of course, is looking at a non-American-led world order. Both sides have also held long memories of Western pressure, Western sanctions, Western hegemony. The last time, in fact, the first time President Putin was here and they started the annual summits, India was still under sanctions, under the nuclear test sanctions imposed by the United States. Now Russia is under sanctions, and also India is facing the tariffs. Discounted Russian oil, that has been a critical aspect of this relationship in the last 3 years since the Ukraine war began. Russia is India's number one energy supplier, number one oil supplier, and that is a factor. India is also a major ally for Russia beyond Beijing. Remember, President Putin said this, his press secretary said this. They want to have the same no limits partnership that they have with China. They want to have the same thing with India. Are there limits, though, to this Russia, India, China trilateral, as it were? We will wait and try and see what will happen over the next 24 hours to try and assess whether or not that's possible. But I want to open this up to our guests. What can we expect over the next day, the next 30 hours or so? Vivek Kajju is former secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs. Will be joined in a moment by Mukesh Aghi of the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum. Sadanand Dhume from the American Enterprise Institute will also be joining us. And Tatiana Kukureva is a senior Russian journalist who will be joining us from Moscow. But let me start with you, Ambassador Kajju. Like I said, this is a time of delicate strategic balancing that's going on. There is this great power competition between America, Russia. There's China as a rising power. How does India maintain this balance between Russia and America? Let's start there.
To be maintained between India and China. Russia is no longer the power that it was during the era of the Soviet Union. Let's be clear on that. We have an intense relationship with Russia, which we need to protect. That relationship is in the civil nuclear area, in space, in defense supplies. But beyond that, Russia is a power that has severe limitations, and that those limitations have increased because of its involvement in the Ukraine war. That war has shown both Russia's advantages, but equally its limitations. So we've got to be conscious of this.
Okay.
It is a time of balancing. And why is this balancing needed? This balancing is needed because this year has not been a particularly good year for the India-US relationship.
Correct.
I don't need to go into details. Please recall that it was in February of this year that Prime Minister Modi was one of the first foreign leaders to meet with President Trump. And there was great expectation in Delhi that the India-US relationship will move ahead rapidly on an upward trajectory. That has not happened. So, therefore, India has had to recalibrate its diplomacy, its foreign policy to a large extent. And what we are seeing today is a product of that recalibration. So, my last point, Zaka, is so the days when Mr. Modi sought to lecture President Putin, if you recollect, that was in September of 2022 on the margins of the SCO summit, when he said publicly that this is not a time for war.
Okay.
I think that era has gone, and India has had to, will have to play a far more delicate game, diplomatic game. But let us also be clear on one point.
Sir, just 1 second, because we have a live link with the CNN reporter Will Ripley, who is in Delhi and will be covering this visit of President Putin over the next day or so. Will, thank you very much for joining us here on News 18. A lot is on the agenda for both President Putin and Prime Minister Modi. There's trade, defense deals, mobility agreements that people are talking about. What, at the end of the day, do you reckon would be the tangible results that we can expect at the end of the day of negotiations tomorrow?
Well, we already know that the two of them are going to be inking a lot of deals, trying to find ways to bolster the economic partnership, the long-standing friendship between India and Russia. But I think what's perhaps even more important than that for both of these men, for Modi and for Putin, is the optics of this. The fact that we saw them once again just moments ago sitting in a limousine together, much like they did several months ago after the SCO summit in China, where they sat and talked privately for nearly an hour in Putin's armored limousine. We saw Prime Minister Narendra Modi waiting on the tarmac to greet Vladimir Putin as he walked off the plane. They are likely doing this, projecting this close relationship, knowing that there's one person in particular glued to the television set watching this very closely. And of course, you and I both know who that is. That's President Donald Trump at the White House. This is coming at a very critical time where relations between Delhi and New Delhi and Washington are arguably at some of the lowest levels in years. At the same time, Russia and the U.S. are trying to figure out a way to negotiate an end to the war in Ukraine. And for Vladimir Putin to be able to come here and stand next to the leader of the world's largest democracy, one of the most powerful leaders in the world, and to stand shoulder to shoulder and project such warmth and friendship, it's a message to Donald Trump, for both Modi and Putin, that they have options no matter what happens with the U.S.
How do you think Washington, in particular the Trump administration, how do you think they're going to view this? The last time, like you said, when they rode together at the SCO summit, I think Trump said something on social media to the effect that I think we've lost India to deep, dark China and Russia. How do you think he's going to view it this time around?
Well, I think it's, of course, I don't know President Trump personally, but from what we see publicly and what he says, he might get pretty jealous to see the two of them so close and chatting so in such a friendly way. President Trump loves himself to sit in the limousine and chat with Prime Minister Modi and to sit with Vladimir Putin. He likes to be in the room when these conversations are happening. And so the fact that he is kind of on the outside looking into this, that's not a great position for him to be in, because he needs things from both Modi and Putin. He wants to end very badly the war in Ukraine. The Russians feel that, frankly, they have a lot more leverage in the situation, which leaves the United States to basically do the easier thing and to pressure the Ukrainians to threaten weapons shipments and intelligence sharing and that sort of thing. There's not a whole lot of pressure that the U.S. can put on Russia right now because the sanctions aren't really working that much. Putin's kind of rejiggered his economy to make it an economy that is supported by this war effort. So the Russians can keep waging war as long as they feel they need to, until they get things like the concessions, the land concessions of the Donbass region. And so for President Trump to be watching that and to know that he doesn't have a whole lot of economic leverage either, because of the fact that India is purchasing so much affordable Russian oil, the economic relationship, the military technology, the fighter jet, information sharing that could be negotiated and signed here in the coming hours. All of it certainly leaves President Trump sitting in the White House wondering what he's going to need to do to get himself in the position that he likes, which is a more powerful position than perhaps the United States is sitting in right now.
Okay, Will Ripley, many thanks for joining us live, covering the visit of President Putin to Delhi. Of course, both of them have now arrived at the Prime Minister's residence, where a private dinner is being hosted by the Prime Minister for the visiting President. Let me also go across and open this up to our panelists. Mukesh Aghi from US-India Strategic Partnership Forum. He's joining us. Tatiana Kukreva is a senior Russian journalist. She's joining us as well, and we'll be joined in a moment by Sudanand Dhume from the American Enterprise Institute. Mr. Aghi, let me start with you. I mean, clearly the backdrop to this entire visit, some would say, the elephant in the room when President Putin and Prime Minister Modi speak will be President Donald Trump. And much of the conversation, I guess, would revolve around India's import of Russian oil, the 50% tariffs that the US has imposed on India. How does India play this delicate balancing act? All right, we're just getting the latest shots from 7 LKM, where both leaders have arrived just moments ago. You can see both of them walk down that red carpet. You've got the Russian flag on the one side, the Indian flag on the other side, and both of them walking in to 7 LKM, which is lit up in the colors of the tricolor and the three colors of the Russian flag, the red, white and blue of the Russian flag and the saffron, white and green of the Indian flag. Both Prime Minister Modi and President Putin getting off that luxury vehicle, walking down the red carpet and going in to 7 LKM, where the Prime Minister is hosting a private dinner for the visiting president of Russia, President Vladimir Putin. As we stay on those pictures, I want to bring in Mukesh Aghi on this note. How will this be viewed in the White House by President Trump? And again, how does India strategically balance its interests at the same time not having to antagonize President Trump?
Well, Zaka, first is when you look at the current situation between India and the US, it is driven more by the US in the current scenario. The second part is the relationship is not just about tariff between the two countries. I think relationship is much broader and deeper. So I think the tariff issue, if you just park aside, we're seeing the trade still moving forward. The students are still coming in. The technology transfer is happening. So that's I would like to say that please let's not focus just on tariff. The relationship is much, much broader. How is this being viewed? I think you have a prime minister who has basically managed this very, very carefully, because you have a country, Russia, which has been with India for many, many years and supported India in every aspect. But at the same time, it's a country which is diminishing power, and economy is in a challenging position, whereas India's largest trading partner is the United States. If you look at the majority of the capital is coming from the U.S. companies. When you look at in the aspect of technology transfer, it's coming more from the U.S. When you look at the global capability centers in India, almost 2,000, 60% are U.S. and creating a lot of innovation in every aspect. So the relationship with the U.S. is still very important, very critical, and it will keep on moving forward. I think the shock of the 50% tariff is gone. India has managed that very well. It has been able to divert a lot of the exports from U.S. to other countries. So I think that leverage which U.S. had has kind of dwindled down substantially. So I would say that while Russian president was coming in, we saw a couple of orders on defense deal that the U.S. announced. They're sending a message to the U.S. also saying that the relationship is very important. We will maintain our relationship with our friends, be it China, be it Russia, or be it European Union. So I think from every aspect, India is playing a very strong role as trying to manage a multilateral relationship between different countries.
I also want to go across to Tatiana, and both Mr. Aghi and Ambassador Kaju before him, one running theme had been, look, Russia is not the power that it used to be. Yes, India has had a long-standing relationship with Russia, even with the Soviet Union, on the defense front, on other fronts, but it is a diminishing power. It is a declining power. How do you see that?
Well, I don't quite agree with that, understandably. If anything, our economy has shown its incredible resilience, because for almost 4 years now, I've heard this. We've heard this every year, saying, "Okay, your economy is going to collapse. You're not going to survive this," and yet here we are. And our economy has actually not just not collapsed, like some of the European countries who are experiencing huge economic troubles due to the sanctions that were originally imposed on Russia. So the fact that we've managed to regroup, restructure the economy shows that Russia is not only a huge power that needs to be taken seriously, because again, we can't just stick to the same narrative of, oh, look, well, Russia's under sanctions, it's struggling, and it's not going to be the same power it used to be. Yes, of course, the Soviet Union was quite a different story. But look at, and first of all, we need to look at what is on the table for this visit. Russia has been involved, for instance, in the nuclear industry with India since 2002, if I'm not mistaken. And right now, Russia is at the forefront of technology when it comes to small modular reactors. This is not going to change. Our defense production is obviously a hugely successful field. And as I think I've already said today, the advantage of Russian defense technology is that it is actually tested in operational capacity. So there are a lot of things that can be discussed. There's a lot of diversification to this relationship that is on the table during this visit. And I believe that, the whole idea of Russia being the underdog here is not at all correct, and it shouldn't.
Okay.
So we should look at things from a different perspective.
So I think Tatiana is right. I mean, tomorrow when the leaders discuss, when they get to the business end of the business day, really, they will be talking about diversification of this relationship. I believe there's something about labor mobility that they will announce tomorrow. There's going to be something about import of fertilizers from Russia. So they're trying to diversify the breadth of this relationship. Sadanand Dhume, senior fellow with the American Enterprise Institute, is also joining us. Sadanand, so, just before you joined, I was making this point both to Mr. Aghi and to Ambassador Kaju that, look, if Trump thought that he could pressurize India with the oil tariffs and get India to put pressure on Mr. Putin to stop the war, that hasn't happened. And if his view was that India will sort of fold and stop importing Russian oil, that hasn't happened either. So how is this visit being viewed in Washington, and this whole strategy of putting those oil tariffs on India, both in terms of what impact it would have on Russia and what impact it would have on India, doesn't seem to have played out, at least the way Mr. Trump thought it would?
Thank you, Zaka. I'm not, my own view, I spent some time pondering this. It's not clear to me how linked those two things were in Mr. Trump's mind. Because on the one hand, you have the fact that he imposed this 25% extra tariff on India. But in terms of US-Russia policy, it seems to kind of blow one way and then the other way. So on the one hand, you have had this sort of attempt to pressure Russia, ironically through India, as opposed to sort of directly. But on the other hand, if you look at US policy towards Russia, I think the US appears to be far more eager to beat out some kind of peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. We've had multiple meetings between Special Envoy Witkoff and President Putin, for example. And so I'm not sure if this was all sort of part of this finely coordinated, finely tuned issue. I think what's happened on the tariffs, at least in part, is that that's just Trump's style of negotiating. It tends to be punitive. He tends to try to raise the stakes. And I think he saw a lever on India on the trade stuff, which was related to Russia, which was sort of, maybe connected somewhat to his larger plans in Russia. But I think the trade dispute is at least in my mind, it's a separate strand of policy here.
Ambassador Kaju, just in terms of, clearly Trump wants to end this war. And even earlier this week, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner were in Russia. Mr. Putin doesn't seem to be in any mind to end this war. He wants to win this war on the battlefield, and he thinks that he's winning the war on the battlefield. But the problem is also those oil tariffs are not going to go away till this war ends. So whether India likes it or not, India has skin in this game. So how does India manage it then, Ambassador?
Look, India has wanted the war to end no sooner had it begun. There's no doubt about it. India wants this war to end. I think it's in India's interest that this war ends quickly. But anyone in Delhi who believes that India has leverage over Russia and can contribute to ending this war would be in cuckoo land. I don't think we really have any leverage over Russia on this. This is a European matter for Russia. It's a Western matter. And the Russians have gained substantially on the battlefield. Trump understands that. The Europeans are still hung up on sovereignty issues. And Putin has an advantage here. He can wait it out for quite some time. I think his economy has held. So that is one aspect. The second is that I do not believe that the tariffs have not hurt us. The tariffs have been in labor-intensive industries. There have been layoffs. And while we have tried to look for other markets, there are areas like textiles, like carpets, etc., where there is no substitute for the American market. So the tariffs have hurt. And Modi would like the tariffs to become more reasonable. Certainly, he would like the 25% based on Russian oil exports, that portion of the tariffs to be history, but that's not happening.
Yeah.
So I think the signal that Mr. Modi is sending to Washington, particularly to Mr. Trump, is that India has alternatives, that India can play the grand strategy game and will not be pressurized by the Americans.
Okay.
The fact is that what is the ambit of play that we have here? On that, we can have a discussion till the cows come home and not arrive at a definite consensus.
Okay.
But my last point, we are hurting. On that, let there be no doubt. Despite all the signaling that is being sent to Washington, we are hurting because of tariffs.
So Mr. Aghi, you know, the problem here is that Trump has undertaken a strategy. I'm not sure the results are paying off. And two, you know, by taking the actions he has taken, he's only pushing India further and further into Russia's embrace. In fact, just before he arrived here, President Putin and his press secretary basically said that we want to have the same kind of relationship with India that we have with China. Now, you could argue that it's not possible because of all kinds of reasons, but at least in the Russian thinking, in the Russian point of view, they want to have the same relationship, the same no limits partnership that they have with Beijing. They want to extend that to India as well. And some would say, why shouldn't India take that hand of friendship? Because after all, Trump is pushing us in that direction.
Well, I would not basically measure the relationship India has with the US vis-a-vis Russia or China, because the relationship is much broader, much deeper. You have around 5+ billion Indian Americans who basically are quite engaged in the economic, social environment, technology environment, academia, and they work very closely either from emotional attachment or economic attachment with India. When you look at the corporate America, and I have talked to roughly 80+ global CEOs in the last 30 days, not a single one has said that they will move the investment out of India, or they will move their supply chain out of India, or they will shorten their investment in their global capability centers. So I think you have to understand the relationship between the United States and India is very, very different than with Russia or with China. I mean, so with Russia, it's more on a commodity base. You know, you're basically getting oil, or you're getting other commodities itself. As far as trade goes, I mean, India's export to Russia is less than $5 billion, whereas with the US and India is over $200 billion two-way trade itself. So I think the relationship is very, very different, very solid. Yes, tariffs are hurting, but I think the relationship is just not just based on tariff. And I think last quarter GDP results showed tariff or no tariff, India's economy grew by 8.2%.
Tatiana, you know, one of the points that a lot of guests have made, and I think what Mr. Aghi was also trying to allude to, is that the relationship between India and Russia basically has two legs. One is the defense relationship, which is an old one. I mean, even today, despite diversification, despite, you know, Atmanirbharta or self-reliance for defense manufacturing, more than 50% of India's weapons inventory has a Russian origin. So that's a long-standing one. And the other leg now, particularly since this war began, is on the energy side, with India importing a lot of Russian oil. But beyond that, you know, whether it is people-to-people contact, and I was looking at it, there are 70,000 Indians who are living and working in Russia right now. There are 5 million Indian Americans. The breadth of this relationship is very limited. It's very thin.
Well, this is exactly what is being looked at in terms of diversification, including during this visit. You know that the State Duma has just ratified the agreement that basically lays the foundation for many things, a legal foundation for including the labor, logistics, but not limited to that. And you know, however small it feels, but like for instance, in central Moscow, where I'm right now, it feels like we've had a lot more tourism from India. There is this connection between the people of Russia and India that has been there for decades. I mean, there is a cultural connection. I've had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Adil Hussein this year and in Moscow, and we spoke of Russian literature and the influence it's had on Indian cinema to begin with. But there's a huge history between our two nations. So to diminish it all to the level of the relationship being stood on, as you say, on two legs of defense exports and energy trade, also even diminishing that to the fact that India literally saved the economies of European nations, even of the US to some extent, by continuing to buy Russian oil and by stopping the oil prices from rocketing sky high back in 2022, it is a little bit too black and white to my taste.
Okay.
Even, yeah.
So Sadanand, you know, the strategic logic in the last 25 years, which underpinned the India-US relationship was, you know, if there's one country that can challenge US primacy, it is China. Somehow Trump seems to have, you know, thrown that logic out the window. He's very keen to cut a deal with Xi Jinping. They even had a phone call, I think, a few days ago when this whole tensions between China and Japan were ratcheting up over Taiwan. He seems keen that he doesn't want to sort of intrude in what he sees as Beijing's sphere of influence or Xi Jinping's sphere of influence. As far as India is concerned, we've had our own history with China, but relations seem to be on the mend. And now Russia is basically saying that we want to have the same relationship with India that we have with China. And there are also concerns that because of the war, effectively one of the consequences of this war has been that Russia has been pushed further and further into Beijing's embrace. That's something that the Russians are also concerned about, and certainly it's something that concerns folks here in New Delhi.
See, Zach, the way I see it, like even if you sort of, you know, for a moment take the, I will come to the US part of your question, but even if you take the US out of the equation for a second and pretend that we were having this conversation, let's say in April this year, when US-India relations looked really strong, looked to be on an upswing, Vice President J.D. Vance was in New Delhi and so on, right? Even at that moment, if we'd had a discussion about the India-Russia relationship, you know, I agree with Tatiana that there's great sentiment. There's a certain amount of, you know, there are cultural links, certainly going back to the, you know, to the Soviet era where you know, Moscow was quite, you know, sophisticated in terms of how it reached out to India and Indian elites and so on. So there's a sentimental element that's certainly there. But if you sort of go beyond that, right? The energy spike only dates to 2022. Before 2022, India had, you know, the amount of energy India imported from Russia was vanishingly small. It was just, you know, less than a 1%. And then you have the arms industry, which has been very important, as you pointed out. 50% still matters. But again, there, if you look at the CIPRI data, it has come down dramatically, right? India has gone from basically being, you know, having roughly 70% of Indian arms imports being of Russian origin to the last 5-year period I looked at, it was down to 35%. Still number one, but to go from 70% to 35% is a very dramatic decline. So what we had until this recent kerfuffle with the US was a strong relationship. Nobody ever thought that India was going to cut its ties with Russia. India has a strong independent relationship with Russia that goes back for decades. It's been mutually reinforced. But the larger strategic dilemma remains, which is that if you look at Eurasia, the economic map of Eurasia has changed very dramatically over the last 25 years. And China has been the big gainer. India has been the second big gainer. And Russia, though it may not be collapsing, is really not in the picture. And so what India finds itself is that it has a China problem with Russia, whether it likes it or not. Now, ideally, from an Indian perspective, the US would be engaged in great power competition. It would view China as its major adversary or rival, and that would continue to be something that drives US-India relations closer.
Okay.
We have an idiosyncratic president in the White House right now who appears to have abandoned that. And that has created all kinds of chaos in the US-India relationship. But India's questions about the Russia-China relationship and Russia-China closeness and Russia dependency on China, those predate this current kerfuffle with India, and those aren't going away because they're based on very strong numbers. The fact is that the Chinese economy is vastly larger than the Russian economy. And the fact is that since 2022, Russia has become much more dependent on China. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just saying this is just a reality. And this raises questions for India. It raises questions for Indian defense planners. How much could it rely on Russia in a crunch?
All right, just one final word. I'm really out of time, Ambassador Kachu. You are putting a hand up, so just one sentence, please. What is it?
Just one sentence,
yeah, please,
Zaka.
please.
I think there is a personal angle, and we know that these great leaders today, President Trump, Prime Minister Modi, President Putin, and Xi Jinping, lay a great deal of emphasis on personal chemistry. I think Trump's actions have deeply embarrassed Prime Minister Modi. And what we are seeing today, which is a good thing for the India-Russia relationship, I'm all in favor of the strengthening of this relationship. But let us not forget that there are personal signals being sent out by Mr. Modi to President Trump.
Okay. All right, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, Ambassador Kaju, Susanna Dhume, and Mr. Mukesh Aghi. Thank you very much indeed for joining us here on this special coverage. But what's really at stake as far as the India-Russia relationship is concerned, I do a little deep dive into what to expect over the next 2 days. President Vladimir Putin of Russia arrived in New Delhi Thursday for the annual India-Russia summit, which marks Russia's long-standing partnership with India. President Putin and Prime Minister Modi are expected to discuss a wide range of issues from defense to energy to talent mobility. As many as 10 agreements between the two governments are expected to be announced during the visit. Putin is traveling with 75 Russian CEOs, the largest delegation that he's carried to India in the last 20 years. But looming over the bilateral discussions between Putin and Modi will be a third figure, a man who's been testing the limits of this partnership, US President Donald Trump. The timing is particularly sensitive for India, which has been searching for ways to resolve its tariff situation with Trump, particularly the oil tariffs. Trump has accused India of financing Russia's war on Ukraine by buying Russian oil. He has singled India out and imposed 25% oil tariffs on India, which is the only country to face these tariffs, even though China imports much more Russian oil than India does. Last month, India's biggest oil companies, both public and private, said that they would stop buying Russian crude after US sanctions on Russian oil giants Rosneft and Lukoil, which are the two biggest Russian energy companies. The bilateral summit signals to the world that both India and Russia are committed to this relationship that dates back to the Soviet Union. This is the 23rd version of the annual summit, which first began in the year 2000 when Vladimir Putin first became president. For both Putin and Modi, this is an opportunity to show to the world, and in particular to Donald Trump, that they have friends and partners beyond America.
Мы нацелены вывести сотрудничество с Китайской Народной Республикой и с Республикой Индия на качественно новый уровень с усилением его технологической составляющей. На это нацелено множество совместных проектов в энергетике, в промышленности, космосе, сельском хозяйстве и так далее. По вопросам экономической повестки у нас выстроен содержательный диалог с председателем Китайской Народной Республики господином Си Цзиньпинем. Также подробно будем обсуждать эти темы в ходе предстоящего визита в Индию с премьер-министром господином Нарендрой Моди, включая увеличение импорта индийских товаров на наш рынок.
But Prime Minister Modi, who shares a warm personal bond with Vladimir Putin, will have to walk a tightrope between managing India's relationship with Russia, which is its biggest arms supplier, while at the same time he has to cater to the United States, which is India's biggest trading partner. And that is a challenging line to walk, even in the best of times. Putin arrived in Delhi Thursday evening for the summit. The following day, he and Prime Minister Modi discussed ways to strengthen trade and economic ties. India-Russia trade ties have been minimal, with India exporting less than $5 billion to Russia. Much of the trade of $68 billion has been dominated by India's import of Russian oil. India would like to diversify its trade with Russia, including increasing India's import of Russian fertilizer, and the construction of small nuclear reactors in India. A new agreement on labor mobility is also expected, which would make it easier for Russian companies to hire workers from India. Russia has been facing an acute labor shortage, which has been exacerbated by the war in Ukraine, and also there's been a decline in the number of migrants coming to Russia from Central Asia. Successive Indian governments have chosen to follow a path of strategic autonomy, where alliances and partnerships are dictated by India's interests. But now India has to strike a balance between two great powers, Russia on the one hand and America on the other. India has strong bond with Russia and depends on Russia for its military weapons. It has faced the wrath of Western countries, both America and Europe, for its neutral stand in the war in Ukraine. India has abstained from all UN votes on the Ukraine war. But the new complication is India's